Hey guys, Alex here, back after a 3-month hiatus in the YouTube Shadow Realm. But hey, we're back. This is the biggest lore video I have ever made. It is the complete story of the God Emperor of mankind, combining every Emperor video I have created into one massive compilation. The goal is simple. By the end of this video, you'll understand everything the Warhammer 40,000 lore currently tells us about the Master of Mankind. This covers the Emperor's story from the very beginning, how powerful he actually is, what his plans were, why he failed and lied, all the way up to the latest official lore and reveals from Games Workshop, available at the time of this video's release. Whether you've watched every video on my channel, or you're discovering them for the first time, this is the definitive Emperor experience. As always, nothing in this video was produced with AI. Every script was researched, written and revised by me and my team, using more than 100 different sources, to create the most complete Emperor lore video out there. So enough yapping. My name is Alex, and this is everything you need to know about the God Emperor of mankind. Before we delve into answering just how powerful the Emperor is, we first have to ask ourselves, who, or even better what, is the Emperor? To start off with some of the basics, we know that the Emperor was roughly 50,000 years old by the time of the era Adeptus, which is around the 42nd millennium, with only Olanius' person stated as being older. The exact origins of the Emperor remain a mystery, but one of the more common beliefs in the community is that he is the product of a group of shamans sacrificing themselves to all reincarnate into a single body, so they could combine their powers to protect humanity from the forces of chaos. Of course, the Emperor himself claims he was born to mortal parents, and even lived through what one might call a bit of a biblical story, where the Emperor's mortal father was brutally murdered by his own brother, in an eerily similar style to Abel and Cain. Nice, GW. We learn of this from the Emperor himself, showing it in a vision to Ra and Endymion, arguably one of the Emperor's most trusted custodians, one of his direct protectors and companions, as seen in Master of Mankind. The custodian saw a vision of a long ago era, one where his emperor was but a boy clutching the skull of his murdered father. Ra watched as the emperor, without any emotion, walked to his father's murderer, and once he was there, he forced the man to die from a heart attack. The emperor's uncle died in that moment, the price he paid for killing his own brother. When the boy walked back to prepare the final funeral rites for his father, he turned to the golden giant that was Ra, who looked like a blazing god in the village of mud brick houses. "Hello, Ra," the boy said in a tongue that would not be spoken on this world for many thousand years. The language was called High Gothic by those who would come to speak it. The golden warrior Ra went to one knee, dazed at the sight of a Terra that hadn't existed for millennia. A clean and fertile place still untouched by war. This world wasn't really Terra at all, it was Earth. With the giant kneeling and the boy standing before him, it was far easier to meet each other's eyes. "My Emperor, you have never shown me this memory before," Ra said. The boy stared at him. "No, I have not. This is where it all began, Ra. Here, on the banks of the Sakarya River." The boy turned his old eyes to the river itself. So much water, so much life. If I had been disappointed by the galaxy's wonders, it is only because we were fortunate enough to grow in such a cradle. There was so much to learn, Ra, so much to know. It pleases me for you to see what it once was. Ra couldn't help but smile at the boy's distracted, contemplative tone. He had heard it many times before, in another man's voice as familiar as his own. "I'm honored to see it, sire." From his father's death and the first murder in human history, so yes, it is just the Cain and Abel story, the Emperor essentially killing Cain, who killed his father Abel. The Emperor knew something had to change. Humanity needed to be guided and shaped, bound by laws and set to follow the course laid by its wisest minds. This is where the journey began for the boy, now still known as Neoth, who would one day be known as the Emperor, Master of Mankind, beloved by all. And from this point onwards, his dreams would be made manifest by the labor of many lifetimes. First, the Emperor nudged humanity in the right direction, creating grand designs and stopping them from exterminating themselves with rocks, fire, arrows, and nuclear wars. He even took up the roles of great diplomats or conquerors like Alexander the Great, or even chose humbler forms. Over the millennia, the emperor would become known by many names and started employing the services of other just as gifted individuals. These perpetuals, as they were called, stood by him for many years, but as time passed on, each realized they could not keep up with the emperor. One by one, these immortal humans left the emperor. But with the emperor possessing the ability to change his form and how people feel him, why exactly does he take the form of a golden warlord when he begins his great crusade? Well, the emperor created the Primarchs, and he knew that for the Primarchs to respect him, he needed to be the ultimate warlord humanity had ever seen. To help with this, Malcador the Sigillite approached, one of the human companions that had been with him for over 5,000 years at this point, who came up with the idea of the Emperor, the Golden Facade, the one face every human warrior in the galaxy would follow into death and hell itself. Alright, with that dramatic introduction out of the way, let's look at how he grew stronger. What got him to this level? Essentially, what did this Dragon Ball Z training arc look like? The Emperor, of course, still had so much to learn before he could set about reuniting humanity under his banner. While he spent many hundreds of lifetimes as a warrior or general, perfecting the art of war, his powers as a psyker would also gift him many abilities. From biomancy, necromancy as noted in the era of rune anthology, all the way to foresight, there were very few skills the Emperor could not master. In his lifetime on Old Earth, there was not a single entity he could not destroy in battle, other than the Void Dragon, an ancient Necron Catan. While he was able to subdue this ancient power, the Emperor chose to lock it up on Mars, where it could no longer harm humanity, at least for the foreseeable future. But through this action, he also somehow laid the first steps towards creating the Mars colonies, and with that, the Martian Mechanicum. A coincidence? Probably not. The Emperor's foresight allowed him to prepare some of his grandest schemes, which would culminate in his Imperium of Man. From Terra, the Emperor would recruit his warriors, the forges of Mars would be where they would be armed, the Selenar gene cults of Luna would take the Emperor's warriors and turn them into legions, cloning their gene seed by the millions. And finally, Saturn would arm his Imperium with some of the mightiest warships available at the time. Each of these cultures and cults came from the Emperor's millennia of planning. But even with his potent psychic gifts, the Emperor was far from powerful enough to become what he needed to be. So the Emperor journeyed to the world of Molech, which was similar to Terra except for its megafauna. While this world was colonized during the Dark Age of technology, the Emperor arrived with a group of perpetuals who still stood by his side. Once there, the Emperor found a literal gateway into the realm of chaos. What exactly transpired beyond this is unknown, but the Emperor left significantly more powerful and with the wisdom and knowledge to create the Primarchs. With the details unknown, the possibilities of what happened on Molech are endless, but the closest thing I can find to an answer can be found in the novel Vengeful Spirit, when the traitor Warmaster enters the same portal and has a very similar end result. Horus Lupercal had traveled to Molech with a giant force to take the world. He had traveled there once before with Fulgrim, Jagatai, the Lion and the Emperor, yet when they left, he took all memory of the place from them. Now Horus returned, and after brutal fighting, the only thing standing in his way was a handful of Ultramarines and the perpetual Olivia Sureka, who guarded the portal. They were swiftly destroyed, and with the help of a demon known as the Red Angel, Horus entered the portal. Those who watched Horus enter were blinded for a moment. Even Mortarion was not comfortable. Horus's Justaran bodyguards argued with the Pale King on whether they should follow or not, but ultimately they decided not to. Horus Lupercal fell through the oil-black surface of the gate and crashed to his knees before Abaddon and Kyber. Behind him, the darkness of the gate vanished with a bang of displaced air. Only a solid wall of mountain rock remained, as though the gate had never existed. Axamant rushed forward to help them as the Warmaster held himself upright on all fours, his back heaved with breath, like a man trapped in a vacuum suddenly returning to the atmosphere. Axamant and Abaddon were beside Horus in an instant, wanting to help him up. "You're still here. You waited for me, after all this time?" "Of course we waited. You've only been gone moments." "Moments? Then everything still has to be done." Horus stood at his full height, and Aximon's eyes widened at the sight of him. The War Master had aged. Catonia had shaped him, molded him into a warrior of flint-hard lines and cruel beauty. 2 centuries of wars had left no mark upon him, but the moments beyond the gate had done what the passage of time could not. Silver streaked the stubble upon his scalp, and the grooves at the corner of his eyes were deeper and more pronounced. The face Aximand had devoted his life to serving was now that of an ancient warrior who had fought for longer than he could have ever imagined, who had seen too much horror, and whose campaigning days had bled him dry. Yet the fire and purpose in his eyes were brighter than ever. Nor was that fire simply confined to his eyes. What Aximand had taken to be cold flesh was the power of the Empyrean distilled and honed within the body of an immortal being. Horus stood taller, fuller, and more powerfully than ever. Lupercal had always found the War Master to be an awkward fit, a term never fully bedded in or taken as read. Now he owned the title, as though it had been his long before there was any such office to take. He was now, naturally, and without equivocation, the War Master. Yes, I found exactly what I was looking for. Now, as we see with Horus, he spent so much time in the realm of chaos that it actually aged him as well as empowered him. But as we all know, the Chaos Gods don't give their power without something in return. It is always and will always be a deal with the devil. But what might help us to fully paint a picture as to what happened to the Emperor and Horus in the realm of chaos, we can also take a look outside the grim darkness of the far future, and instead take a look at the Old World and Age of Sigmar. Some might argue 40K and AOS are not related, and while I'm not here to settle or debate this argument, I do want to draw a comparison so we can better understand the importance of Molag. To do this, we will specifically be taking a look at the Ever-Chosen Battle Tome and the following piece of lore. Little record exists of Archaon's history before the beginning of the Age of Myth, save tales of blood and conquest told by the Dark Priest and gibbering demons. It was a time of savagery beyond the mind of men to comprehend, and an age when the Ever-Chosen traveled between worlds seeking slaughter. For unrecorded eons, Archaon rose across the realms of chaos. Wherever he marched out from the impossible lands of that cursed dimension, no world was safe from his armies, and in the name of the Dark Gods, kingdoms and empires burned and bled. Each victory proved once more Archaon's mastery of war, and new trophies were heaped upon the idols of the ruinous powers. At his order, whole worlds burned, almost without counting where the grim legends forged in this time, and the realm of chaos still echoes the dark tales of the Ever-Chosen's crusade. As seen with Archaon, Horus, and the Emperor, they might have genuinely spent eons in the realm of chaos, fighting and destroying many civilizations, and growing even more powerful. Of course, this should be taken with a bit of salt, but this is my personal theory. There's also, of course, a stark difference between Horus and the Emperor himself. Horus came to Molag to learn of the Emperor's secrets and left, ascended with the powers of a growing god. The Emperor, meanwhile, came to unlock the secrets to create the Trademarks by stealing power from the Dark Gods, very much like Prometheus in Greek mythology, stealing fire to give it to mankind. Now that we have covered the Emperor until the Great Crusade, it is time to take a look at some of his achievements during his crusade. First, we will take a look at the time Karn witnessed the Emperor fight on Nova Shendak against a world of worms, as seen in After Dashea. These giant worms were intelligent, hateful, and used filament weapons of metal feathers. These worms turned planets into mud and used their sonic screams and witch whispers to travel through them. The worms even used humans to hunt and farm them. When the Great Crusade found them, they held 3 systems, and it was the Warhounds alongside the Iron Warriors of Perturabo to purge these Xenos. Karn told the story to Angron the first time they met, hoping he could convince his Primarch to join this Great Crusade. While under Perturabo, the Space Marines did the impossible, the battle was still brutal. Defenses were smashed, traps were sprung, Astartes and worms died. Angron pointed out that so far, Karn had only mentioned the enemy, Perturabo and the warriors of the Emperor, but not the Emperor himself. The Emperor. Karn said, and couldn't stop himself from smiling at the memory. The Emperor was a golden storm descending onto Nova Shandak's field. When the worms were amongst us, he came down from the peak, and it was as if he had brought a fragment of the sun down for us, in amends for the sun we couldn't see through those filthy fogs. He shone out over the battle like a beacon. His custodians were like living banners. The troopers rallied to them, but Karn closed his eyes, looking for the words. Imagine, sire. Did they fight in your home with grenades, explosive weapons, small enough to hold in a hand and throw? High Rider weapons, snarled Angron, not fit for a warrior on the hot dust. But imagine, Primarch, some. He searched for the word Angron had used. Some paperskin who takes a grenade and simply grips it in his fist until it explodes. Imagine how it would destroy his hand, shatter the arm, ruin the body. Wherever the Emperor met one of their columns head on and shattered it like that, he didn't repel them, sire. He didn't defeat them. He ruined them. Assault after assault, not even Perturabo could match him in his fury. The story was not finished, but Karn had made his point. This is but a second-hand account of seeing the Emperor fight, but is he actually unbeatable? Or is there something more to it? As seen in the Wolf of Ashen Fire, as mighty as the Emperor is, he is not unbeatable. Such as when he fought the Mech Warlord, a massive orc warboss who is only dwarfed by the Beast of Ulanor himself, a supposed Krork. During this battle, the Lunawolves and Custodes fought giant orcs and a variety of the mechanical monsters, with even a dozen Custodes being laid low. He had no weapon, and where that wasn't normally a handicap to a warrior of the legions, against this foe it was a definite disadvantage. No weapon of his would hurt his beast anyway, but one of its own. Horus gripped one of the warlord's mechanized arms, one bearing the spinning brass spheres and crackling lines of lightning weapons. The armor's strength was prodigious, but centimeter by centimeter, Horus forced it around. Lightning blasted from the weapon, burning Horus's hands black. Bone gleamed through the ruin of his flesh, but what was that pain when set against the loss of a father? With one last Herculean effort, Horus wrenched the arm up as a sawing blast of white-edged lightning erupted from the weapon. A searing burst of fire impacted on the warlord's mech forearm, and the limb exploded from the elbow down in a welter of blackened bone and boiling blood. The beast grunted in surprise, dropping the Emperor and staring in dumb fascination at the ruins of its arm. Seizing the chance he had been given, the Emperor bent low and surged upward with his blue steel sword extended. The tip ripped into the mech warlord's belly and burst from its back in a shower of sparks. "Now you die," said the Emperor, and ripped his blade up. It was an awful, agonizing mortal wound. Electrical fire vented from the hideous metal organs within the wreckage of the greenskin's body. It was a murderous wound that not even a beast of such unimaginable proportions could take and live. Yet, that was not the worst of it. Horus felt the buildup of colossal psychic energies and shielded his eyes as a furious light built within the Emperor. Power like nothing he had seen his father wield, or even suspected he possessed. All-consuming, all-powerful, it was the power to extinguish life in every sphere of his existence. Physical flesh turned to ash before it, and what ancient fates had once called a soul was burned out of existence, never to cohere again. Nothing would ever remain of he who suffered such a fate. Their body and soul would pass from the finite energy of the universe to fade into memory and have all that they were wiped from the canvas of all existences. This was as complete a death as it was possible to suffer. That power blazed along the Emperor's sword, filling the greenskin with killing light. It erupted in a bellowing golden explosion, a lightning blazed from the coruscanting aftergrimage of its death, arcing from orc to orc as it sought out all those who were kin of the Master of Goro. Unimaginable energies poured from the Emperor, reaching throughout the entirety of the chamber and burning every last shred of alien flesh to a mist of drifting golden ash. Horus watched as the power of life and death coursed through the Emperor, saw him swell in stature until he was like a god, wreathed in pollutic amber flames, towering and majestic. Even as the world around him, made by the orcs of scrap, began to fall in on itself, the Emperor possessed enough psychic power to save not only himself, but also Horus and the forces that joined him in the spear tip. He essentially kamehameha'd the orc into the ether, and then just left with the boys under his arms while putting on sunglasses. By the way, give the story a read, it's really good and really quite fun. With so much power and skill as a warlord, the Emperor was as close to unstoppable as one could imagine. And the only reason the Horus Heresy had a chance in the first place is because of Magnus the Red and his titanic psychic effort to send a message to his father on Terra. Yet, while ignorant of the fact, Magnus ultimately broke the psychic wards keeping a portal of the webway guarded, which required the Emperor himself to keep close while enthroned on the Golden Throne. This would be the beginning of the war in the webway, where the Legio Custodes, Sisters of Silence, and even the forces of the Mechanicum were required to push back an endless tide of demons. The fighting was so fierce that entire strike forces of the Emperor's talons disappeared in moments. Even a Side Titan was brought to its knees when it held a tunnel by itself. The war in the webway was the most important battle of the Horus Heresy, and the Imperium was losing. Some of the greatest heroes of the Imperium were laid low, and if you remember my How Powerful Are Custodes video, then you also know some Custodes fought with insane injuries and they were still losing. Only when the Emperor finally found a moment to get off the Golden Throne would he change the tide of his battle. Those who looked on saw something impossible in the sunless realm. The sun finally rose, as Sinan, master of mankind. His features were those of one born in the wildlands of ancient Eurasia. His skin was a Terran blend of bronze and burnt umber, his eyes darker still, his hair darkest of all. The long black fall of his hair was held by a simple circled crown of metal leaves, binding the mane back from his face so he could fight. More practical than regal. He moved as a man moved, coming through the straining ranks of his guardians on foot, pushing through the press of bodies on the rare instances they didn't instinctively move aside for him. He wore gold, as all of his guardians wore gold. The same sigils of Terran unity and imperial nobility that showed on their armor were cast thricefold upon his own. His armor joints didn't growl with the crude industrial snarl of mass-manufactured legionary plate, but purred with the song of older, purer technologies. On his back, held by a simple strap against his flowing red cloak, was an ornate bolter of black and bronze. In his hand, he carried a sword, one that looked nothing like the blade portrayed in the victory murals and illustrated sagas. By the standards of Terran lords and kings, it was inarguably beautiful. But in the grip of the ruler of an entire species, it was perhaps rather plain. A weapon to wield, a weapon for shedding blood, not an ornament to be admired. Impossibly complicated circuitry latticed its blade, black and coppery against a silver so hallowed that it was almost blue. In other wars on other worlds, he had greeted his custodians with subtle telepathy, speaking their names as he passed them before a battle. Here, he was more restrained, moving to the embattled front rank without offering any acknowledgement at all. Of the Neverborn, some broke ranks and fled. These cowardly shards of their vile masters knew that destruction had come. Some tore into each other, cannibalizing their kindred for strength in the face of destruction. Some lost what little grasp they had on corporeal reality, their forms melting and dissolving before the sword-wielding monarch even reached the front lines. The strongest raged at the sin of his existence. With a gestalt bellow loud enough to shake the windless air of this alternate reality, they fought to reach their arch-enemy. Ra was at the Emperor's side, spear whirling, lashing out to punch through the amorphous bodies of flailing blue creatures that wheeled through their many mouths. Sweat baked his face inside his helmet. The blood in his muscles was heavier than liquid lead. Orders, sire. The Emperor raised his sword in a two-handed grip. As his knuckles tightened, the geography of circuitry ignited along the blade's length, spitting electrical fire and wreathing the sword length in flame. He didn't speak, he didn't look at any of his custodies. The sword came down. The webway caught fire. The Emperor's power was divided between stopping the webway from consuming Terra and enacting a bloody vengeance on the Neverborn. From the fires came 10,000 fallen warriors, the silhouettes of space marines, the betrayed dead of Istvan cleaving demons with fiery axes and swords. The 10th son of the Emperor was at their head, briefly reborn in his father's immolating wrath. The Emperor would not be wounded until Drakenien, the End of Emperor, spawned by the first murder that had also shaped the Emperor into the man he was today, wounded him. But this wound was a trap to ensnare the powerful demon, and sent it away with the equally wounded Ra Endymion as its gallower. By following the adventures of the Emperor, we see him go from a young boy to a warlord and eventually into the master of mankind we know today. But as the Horus heresy progressed, the Emperor needed to become something even more powerful to face his traitor son. While more powerful than any Primarch, even the ones who became demonic like Angron or Fulgrim, the Emperor could no longer match Horus Ascended. Horus, who gained even more and more power as time passed on, paying with his sanity and soul, and who knows what else, to become the ultimate God King. So the Emperor began to do something similar, tapping into the raw force of the warp to become the Dark King. But even as the Dark King, the Emperor only tapped into the warp instead of feeding and using it like Horus did. But was this truly enough to beat Horus? The answer is sadly no. But if the Emperor would drink from the warp the same way Horus did, he would drink and drink until nothing remained of the boy who would be king. The master of mankind, beloved by all, would have given way to the Dark King. And what is the Dark King if not a dark prince of slaughter, change, ruin, and disease? To save humanity from the same doom that befell the Eldar, Olanius' person convinced the Emperor not to siphon off the warp and fight Horus with his own might, to face the giant as a mere man. So now we get to the part where Horus and the Emperor fight, where we see the Avatar of Chaos, empowered by all 4 Chaos Gods at once, fight the Anatomy of Chaos itself. The Emperor tries his best, but in the end, he is not actually strong enough. Spoilers for those that haven't read The End in the Death Part 3. Please use the timestamps in the description to skip ahead if you wish to read this for yourself. This story plays out from Horus's perspective. You won't kill him. You are going to make him accept his fate. You will make him want the thing he does not want. The crown, the throne, submission to you and you alone. Death is too easy an escape, too merciful a release, after all he has done to you. He has been down so long, you could have killed him 6 or 7 times over with them all. A single burst of bloodlight from the eye on your chestplate would have annihilated him, more roughly than he did with that fawning idiot of a Hetarion. But you won't. You circle him patiently. He's propped up on his arm, and his breathing has become so labored. He is almost panting. He's almost spent. He tries once more to rise. He fails. Don't you understand? You ask. I could have killed you the moment you got here. I fought you because I wanted you to live. He makes no answer, yet in the bloody tatters of his thoughts, you perceive the truth as he sees it. You didn't kill him right away because you didn't want to. Does he really believe that? Is he so deluded? You were trying to demonstrate your wisdom of authority, the qualities of grace, restraint and compassion that will characterize your reign and prove you to be far finer, fairer monarch than he ever was. Power is nothing. Killing is a soldier's work or the blunt answer of the inarticulate. Mercy and fairness are the instruments a worthy king wields. Still, his sputtering, fading thoughts insist the human part of you did not want to kill him, just as it does not want to do what the gods command. No one commands me, father. Not anymore. This is what this damned war's been about. He sighs. He thinks that if you believe that, then you have learned nothing. He bows his head. You go to him, crouch down, and make to lift him back up on the throne where he belongs. He looks up at you. His hand comes out from under him, swinging the crown you made. The tips of the bloodlight spikes stab into your face and split open your skull. After this, the Emperor ends up getting beaten quite brutally. Yet in a moment of clarity of both Horus and Big E, Horus begs his father to end his nightmare as the 4 Chaos Gods slowly retreat back. The Emperor, as we know, blasts Horus' soul just like he did with that Orc war boss, and after this, collapses, getting carried back to the Golden Throne by Constantine and Rogol Dorn, to be interred and lead humanity from its confines for the next 10,000 years. Finally, we take a look at the Emperor as he is in modern 40k. In many ways, the Emperor has become even more powerful than the Dark King. If you didn't know, at the end of the heresy, as the Emperor gets interred onto the Golden Throne, they start feeding him 1000 Psyker souls a day. It is said that these empower him and are used to keep powering the Astronomicon at the same time, and over the course of 10,000 years have been fueling his psychic might in the warp to better protect Terra, and with it the Imperium, from being swallowed by chaos and falling apart. With this constant drip of power that is siphoned right into his soul, which has grown into a star-like entity of light and personalities that all speak over each other and argue with each other as they try to portray their shared desires. That's a deep dive for another day. Simply put, the Emperor has gained a lot of new powers. We see him empower his living saints, raising them into essentially mini demon princes. They are capable of turning the tide of battle by just arriving, shining his golden light into the recesses of darkness, and burning demons with blazing beams of righteous fire that exert from their weapons and eyes. Even the demon Primarch Mortarion and Kugat Plaguefather fled when faced with the Emperor's wrath in the form of a living saint. Ultimately, the greatest display of power we see of the Emperor would be in Dark Imperium Goldblight, when he intervened on Guilliman's behalf. Nurgle could only watch as Mortarion's victory was taken from him. Even as he moved to strike down Guilliman, he froze. The battered and broken Primarch was not only healing, he was fully regenerating. Even his ruined armor was being mended. Guilliman's corpse rose up and hung in the air, supported by a pillar of radiance, and slowly turned so he was upright. He reached out, and the Emperor's sword appeared in his hand, and burned with the fire of 1,000 suns. He speaks to me, brother. Does he not speak to you? The unbearable radiance enfolded Guilliman, so glaring Mortarion threw up his hands. Father! Mortarion said, and his voice quailed like a little boy discovering the cause of some small but unforgivable crime. I am his right-hand brother. I am his general, his champion. I am the avenging son. By his might am I preserved. The landscape flickered between the blasted battlefield of Eax and the garden of Nurgle. The ground of the garden was rolling. Mortarion was sent back to Nurgle, who was more displeased with him every passing second. Hear me! Guilliman's voice boomed through eternities. The sword blazed higher until the fire of it threatened to burn out time. I am Rabute Guilliman, last loyal son of the Emperor of Terra. It is not your destiny to end today, God of Plague, but know that I am coming for you, and I will find you, and you will burn. He gripped the sword of the Emperor two-handed and raised it high. Rising waves of fire ripped into the garden. From the great manse, a cry of rage sounded, as a wall of flame hotter than 1,000,000 suns devoured everything in its path, finally breaking and receding within yards of the black walls of Nurgle's house. Its infinite halls shook, mossy tiles fell from the roof, sodden timber steamed. This is a warning. The warp and the materium were once in balance. For too long you have tipped the scales. Understand that it is not only the warp that is capable of pushing back. This realm is not real. Only will is real, and none may outmatch my will. Be assured, Lord of Plagues, and convey this message to your brothers, that I do not speak for myself. I speak for the Emperor of mankind. So yes, the Emperor cannot just straight up revive someone now, but at the same time, he subdues Mortarion into a state of panic, burns Nurgle's garden itself, and then ends up letting Guilliman finish the job. Now, that is his current timeline. Of course, there are many moments, details and excerpts that I'd love to cover, but I think we have enough to take a look at the Emperor of Mankind's power scale. Now for the power scale level. For 40k, we used a definitely scientifically proven rating of 40 Warhammers. If a guardsman is 1 Warhammer, a space marine equals 10 Warhammers, and a Primarch is about 40 Warhammers, how many hammers can we give to the Emperor? As shown by the lore and excerpts we have covered today, the Emperor is, in his various forms and parts of his life, insanely powerful. But is he really the most powerful individual god in all of 40k? As we saw, there is no threat in the galaxy currently alive that could truly kill the Emperor. Sure, the Orc Mech Warlord came close, but with the Emperor there, often there are second meanings to things. Maybe he wanted Horus to prove himself by saving his life to strengthen their bond, or maybe to see if Horus was truly worthy of his role of War Master. Well, we have seen maybe the smallest god in all of 40k, Tauva, who ends up destroying an entire Nurgle fleet with terrifying ease. The Emperor sends greater demons screaming into the warp by just empowering his living saints. And when he essentially possessed Guilliman, the very Garden of Nurgle was damaged. An act that served as a warning to the grandfather of plagues, meaning that hypothetically, yes, the Emperor does seem capable of fighting the Chaos Gods one-on-one. Furthermore, according to Dan Abnett, the Emperor is not a true god but rather a god engine. Imagine a nuclear reactor but for godlike entities, fed by 1,000 souls a day that grow its soul. So if he were to be allowed to charge his powers for another 10,000 years, how would that look like? Would he be able to just obliterate another god? Or would he just implode on himself, kind of like a black hole of light and devotion? It should also be noted that while the Chaos Gods are in an ever-ending cycle of winning and losing in their great game, Nurgle is currently on the losing end, with Khorne and Tzeentch wrestling for true dominance. But as is always the case, it is only a matter of time for Khorne and Tzeentch to be subverted by Nurgle and Slaanesh once again. But the Emperor is not without his flaws. His intellect is vast, but so is his impatience, causing him to rush things. From losing most of the Perpetuals to speedrunning the Great Crusade, to even miffing off his own custodies for wanting to steal the fire of the Chaos Gods to get to his goals quicker. In many ways, the Emperor created his own doom. Even Malcador, his best friend, knew deep in his bones they had failed. As the war in the Webway ended, the Emperor, for the first time ever, did not know where to go next. Now, this is a bit of a step away from the norm of my How Strong is X series. But heck, it's do or don't time, so why don't we take a look at what stats the Emperor would have in the Horus Heresy tabletop. I should quickly add, I am no master at homebrewing rules, and these will be not perfect nor balanced. Just a bit of fun theorization to add something fun to round out this video before we get into power scaling. Now, while this might seem impossible, I would like you to keep in mind that the Horus Heresy does have rules for Horus Ascended. The version that walked out of the door on Moloch and had done the exact same thing the Emperor did. This guy is essentially a god at this point. For the Emperor's weapon skill and ballistic skill, he would have 10s in both stats. His movement would be 8 inches, his strength and toughness should come in at a staggering 10 for both, as well as him having about 8 wounds. Finally, his initiative would be 8, and he would have 8 attacks as well. These final 2 stats will be an easy guess, but his leadership is gonna be 10 and his armor save is gonna be like a 2+, let's be real. For his equipment, not only would his armor grant him a 3+ and vulnerable save, just like the rules for Dorn we have for the Primarch model in Horus Heresy 2.0, he could never be wounded on something better than a 4+. His weapons would be absolutely destructive. Strength user, AP1, instant death, specialist weapon, mastercrafted and deflegate for the sword. And for his power claw, I just say something like a power fist. Strength times 2, AP1, instant death, specialist weapon, mastercrafted and shred. His bolter will be 30 inches range, strength 6, AP2, assault 3, mastercrafted, shred and murderous strike 4+. Why did we go for this? Because, you know, he would probably just be hitting people through like eye lenses from a mile away. This guy does have 50,000 years of experience. The Emperor's special rules would be something along the lines of the same as the Primarch rule, the counterattack, deep strike, adamantium will, master of mankind, allowing him to use any psychic power in the game, similar to the Arch Sorcerer, and then of course, my favorite rule, beloved by all. The Emperor always succeeds leadership tests. Any Custodies and Primarch unit in your army also succeeds. Any friendly unit within 12 inches also automatically succeeds. And of course, who could have guessed, he is a loyalist. All at a nice round price of 1500 points. So he's about the Primarch choice for the Legio Custodes besides Valdor, and he's the same price as a Reaver Titan. I imagine, like, if you put these rules against the normal Horus Ascended, it ain't gonna be great. Let's just say that the Emperor didn't roll so well when Horus started smacking him. Maybe Horus just had, you know, weighted dice or something. And with that, I rank the Emperor at 40 Warhammers out of 40. Yeah, the skill was built around him, and if you watched my earlier videos, you would have seen this coming. I think he might currently be the strongest singular god, but as we have seen over and over, when their plans align for a single moment, the Chaos Gods do come together to empower a single champion to slowly break down their one true enemy. But that is just my theory. But before we get into the grand plan for after the Great Crusade, we first have to take a look at the plan for the Great Crusade itself. How and why was it done in the first place? This information is really important to understand before we get into the grand plan itself. Don't worry, I'll keep it quick. When the Emperor of Mankind, beloved by all, began his Great Crusade, he did so wishing to reforge humanity's dominion over the stars. His endless armies would conquer 1,000 worlds 1,000 times. Countless Xeno civilizations were exterminated. Long-lost colonies built from the ignorance of old night embraced the imperial truth. Gods were not real. To call the Great Crusade a Herculean task is an understatement, as it almost bordered on the Sisyphean. The crusade was something not even the Emperor could complete by himself, even with Malcador the Sigillite and the Custodes at his side. So the Master of Mankind needed even greater warriors and leaders of men to fulfill his dream. In turn, after making a deal with the Chaos Gods on Molech, the Emperor created the Primarchs and Legiones Astartes to fight the Great Crusade. These genetically enhanced warriors far surpassed anything a mortal man was capable of, and with them by his side, the Emperor had become unstoppable. It is therefore that the Chaos Gods scattered the Primarchs across the galaxy in hopes of both delaying the Imperium and laying the foundation for their corruption in return for the power that was stolen from them. But the Emperor, as per usual, was undaunted by this challenge. With Terra and the Sol System unified, the first of his Space Marines had hardened themselves in war. These fledgling Legiones Astartes would have to fight without their Primarchs until the Emperor could reunite with each of them. As they set about this task, the Imperium faced some of the greatest threats in the galaxy. Threats that, if not destroyed fast enough, could have exterminated all of humanity in mere decades. After 2 full centuries of war, 200 years of conquering and reuniting with all of his sons, the Master of Mankind did the unthinkable. The Emperor declared Horus Lupercal his War Master, so he would continue the Great Crusade, while the Emperor himself tended to his secret projects back on Holy Terra. Chief amongst these was the Webway project. The Emperor's dream apparently far exceeded the unification of mankind and conquering the stars. The Emperor was either running out of time or out of patience. But in any case, this decision to hide away from his generals would change everything. In the absence of the Emperor, the Chaos Gods worked to turn his sons against him. Horus, most beloved son of the Emperor and War Master of the Imperium, would turn against his father after being stabbed with a chaos-corrupted blade. From the galactic rim to the skies of Terra, the galaxy would burn. This, in and of itself, was a major setback in the Emperor's designs, but few moments proved more pivotal than when Magnus the Red, trying to save the Imperium and warn his father of Horus's betrayal, destroyed the protective wards of the Webway. Magnus hoped to avoid further calamity, but instead, he allowed for endless legions of demons to flood the Webway, a mistake that would see the Emperor's dream shattered into a billion pieces. But how would the galaxy look if the Emperor succeeded in his plans? Imagine for a moment if Lorgar and maybe even Erebus never fell to the allure of the Chaos Gods, or if Horus was never wounded on Davin, or even Magnus never destroyed the Webway. Humanity would find itself on the very edge of succeeding when the Horus Heresy began. In a galaxy where no one could challenge humanity, would there even be wars for the Legiones Astartes to fight? Better yet, why was the Webway so important in all of this? Being able to travel close to the speed of light while not using the warp is a boon that could change everything. But was that enough? Well, the Emperor knew that this wasn't enough. Him and Malcador had more than one contingency in place. But he also wasn't perfect and made a grave mistake when setting out for the Great Crusade. He was rushing. And when humans rush, mistakes are sure to be about. But before we get into the contingencies and side plans for after the Great Crusade, I am going to give you a sharp and easy breakdown of every purpose of the crusade itself. This will make it really easy to understand and start to see Neil's vision. And yes, the Emperor's name before, well, being the Emperor of Mankind was Neil. I don't believe that is his actual born name, but I'm getting off topic. Let's take a look at the list of purposes for the Great Crusade. Creation of the Imperium and reunification of mankind. The most direct and immediate goal of the Great Crusade is, of course, the creation of an Imperium of man. In ages past, humanity eagerly explored the stars and spread itself out. But when the cybernetic revolt began and the Age of Strife burned us into the ground due to the rampant appearance of psychers, every world found itself besieged and completely isolated. The threat of the Psyker and the Mutant utterly ruined the unity of man, leading to endless civil war. The cybernetic revolt was a conflict that saw the very weapons designed to protect humanity from Xenos turned against them. With these threats breaking humanity's curiosity and trust on a galactic level, the endless invasions of violent Xenos would have resulted in the extinction of man. Whether the Emperor's enemies be psychers, mutants, aliens, or even an abominable intelligence, he was determined to destroy them all. It is on these principles that the Great Crusade was founded. Humanity would rise from the Age of Strife and reclaim its birthright. Destruction and revenge on Xenos empires. When humanity was at its weakest, it would be beset on all sides. Countless Xenos marauders, petty empires, and massive invasion fleets attacked the isolated worlds. This action was an insult the Emperor would not suffer, and so his Space Marines broke every Xenos empire within the galaxy. Crave and Harut infestations were purged. In some cases, entire craft worlds were burned for their crimes, but none of these could compare to the two greatest threats. The first of these was the Rangda, a vile alien race the Imperium would fight throughout 3 wars, known as the Rangdan Xenocides. These Xenocides saw the deployment of the Dark Angels, Space Wolves, and even tell the rumors of both the Alpha Legion and one of the Lost Legions joining in. The death toll amongst the Astartes was greater than 100,000 Space Marines by the end of the Xenocides. The Space Wolves would earn the dark title of the Emperor's Executioners, and alongside the Dark Angels would the reputations of both these legions be changed forever. The price paid was high, but their Rangda would be vanquished from the galaxy. The other greatest threat to humanity was the Orc Empire of Ulanor. The might of this singular Orc Empire was something so gargantuan that not even Horus could truly understand it, until the Emperor showed him the greater picture, as seen in The Wolf of Ash and Fire. The Greenskins will never recover from this. Their power is broken. It will be thousands of years before the beast arises again. The Emperor shook his head, drawing a shimmering orrery of light from the disc. Gently glowing points of light rotated around the edge of the disc. Scores of systems, hundreds of worlds. Would that you were right, my son, but the Greenskin is a cancer upon this galaxy. For every one of their ramshackle empires we burn to the ground, another arises, even greater and even more deeply entrenched. Such is the nature of the Orc, and this is why their race is so hard to destroy. They must be eradicated wholesale, or they will return all the stronger, time and time again, until they come at us in numbers too great to defeat. then we are to be cursed by the greenskin for all of time. Not if we act swiftly and without mercy. I am your sword, show me where to strike. The Emperor smiled, and Horus felt his heart swell in pride. The Talon Reach was but a satrapy of the largest empire we have encountered. One that must fall before the crusade can continue. It will be magnificent, the war we will wage to destroy this empire. You will earn much honor in its prosecution, and men will speak of it until the stars themselves go out. And this is it? Asked Horus, leaning over the glowing hololith. First one, then dozens, and finally hundreds of worlds were outlined in green. Yes, this is Ulanor. The worst part of it all, when the Emperor said the orcs must be destroyed wholesale or they will return stronger. He was right. Centuries later, when the Imperium was engaged in the War of the Beast, they fought an orc empire that completely overshadowed the original Ulanor Empire. And Terra itself was invaded. Honestly, not even just invaded, almost outright destroyed before the intervention of a returned Vulcan. For all their memes, orcs are no joke. Buying space and time for the secret project. And lastly, and of course this is my personal interpretation, but I think this one is pretty clear. The Emperor rushed to buy himself time for his secret projects. If the gods, Xenos and renegade upstarts were so busy with holding off his great crusade, he bought himself extra time to work on Terra in complete secret, because everybody was too busy looking in the wrong direction. He wanted a webway empire, he wanted to evolve humanity, he wished to give us a true long-term safety net without the fear of AI or dark gods. For how much of a dingus the Emperor is at times in the novels, he had the right idea. But enough teasing, let's get into the Emperor's true plan for after the Great Crusade. The novel Master of Mankind plays a rather important role in understanding the Emperor's grand plan. Not only does the Emperor see a future where humans have become a psychic species that is not only more powerful than the Eldar, but so influential that the uncontrolled energy could tear reality apart, but he also seems to understand that humanity cannot really be controlled. They can only be pushed in the right direction. The Emperor shares this potential future with one of his most trusted custodians, Ra Endymion, talking about the fall of the Eldar, its likeness to humanity, and how the warp truly works and also endangers us, as seen in Master of Mankind. We see the warp as an alternate reality, and this is so. It is a mirror reflecting our every thought and action, every hate, every death, every nightmare and dream, echoing into eternity. We break into this place, into a realm that harbors the pain and suffering of every man, woman and child to ever live. And we use it to sail between the stars, because we must, because until now, there has been no other choice. The webway is our new choice? Ra murmured into the silent night. The webway. Mankind is ascending, Ra. Humanity is taking a great developmental step, evolving into a psychic race. Uncontrolled psychers are lodestones for the warp's touch. A species compromising them would suffer as the Eldar suffered. And for the Eldar, this evolutionary juncture was their final step before destruction. I will not let humanity be destroyed by the same fate. The Eldar had the answers within their grasp, but were too naive and too proud to save themselves. They had the webway, which could have been their salvation, but they never fully severed their connection to the warp. Their soul fires drew damnation upon their entire species. Ra knew this, yet never had it been related to him in these exact words, flavored as they were by the promise of prophecy. Within the webway, humanity would need no navigators. They would never need to rely on the unreliable warp whispers of astropaths. Vessels would never enter the warp to be lost or torn apart by the entities that dwelt within it. But the Eldar had done the same, had they not? No, they eradicated their reliance on the warp, but they never severed their species' connection to it. I will do that for humanity, once and for all. I have conquered humanity's cradle world. I have conquered the galaxy in order to shape mankind's development as it at last evolves into a psychic race. The Emperor knew he could not let any isolated pockets of humanity remain free, for it would bring destruction to the entire galaxy. If you leave people behind to go live in a realm of beauty and true safety, others will get jealous. Through his Webway project, the Emperor could offer humanity a way to travel without using the warp and to communicate without the use of astropaths. And finally, when the Emperor has his Pax Imperialis, meaning the Imperium's peace, he can guide humanity into becoming a psychic species that won't make the same mistakes of the Eldar. For the Emperor, his control and tyranny over humanity is but a means to an end. By sharing all of his visions and grand ambitions with Ra, the Tribune found himself moved to tears. One last note on this novel, it also shows that the Emperor was building cities and establishments within the Human Webway project. Maybe it wasn't just for traveling. I personally almost believe that he wanted to move us into the Webway forever. But we will revisit that by the end of this video, as there is another very important perspective we need to look at. Malcador the Sigillite didn't only help the Emperor, he planned like half of it. This is his plan too. Let's take a look at Malcador the Hero's thoughts, wishes, and see if we can find any more reasons as to why the Great Crusade and subsequent mistake, known as the Horus Heresy, actually happened. Malcador the Sigillite is the Emperor's closest confidant and perhaps the only man he can call a friend. Yet what is often overlooked is just how important Malcador was in shaping the public image of the master of mankind. Deep in his heart, the Emperor is many things: a philosopher king, a scientist, a ruler, a visionary, but also a warlord. So with the creation of the Primarchs, the Emperor needed to adopt the persona of the ultimate warlord. A warrior king clad in gold, in one hand a flaming sword, and the other a mighty claw, resting upon his brow the laurels of countless victories. An image shaped for no other reason than to earn the respect of his Primarchs, who themselves are godlike warlords before anything else. Yet from Malcador we also learn something important about the Imperium of Man. As to put it simply, the Great Crusade was not done to create the Imperium of Astartes or other post-humans, but instead the Imperium of mankind. The Legiones Astartes had a lifespan, one unrelated to age or timed infirmity like the Thunder Warriors. Instead, the Primarchs were meant to turn on one another. The Emperor was unequal in his favor, and rivalries were inserted on purpose, without the Primarchs ever knowing. Malcador also had his disagreements with the Emperor, perhaps one of the most important being his opinion that the Primarchs should have been taught the dangers of the warp. But Malcador is also someone who schemes and has lied to his own friends. When his personal astropath, Sibyl Niasta, was on her deathbed, he told her a part of the Emperor's plan. But when she passed, he admitted it was not the full truth. But I am not too sure of that. Maybe it's a double lie to make himself feel better. Let's take a look at the excerpt from The End in the Depth Volume 1. During the years of global unification, it was often necessary for him to manifest as a warlord, because humans respond to authority when they are frightened or confused. During the period of galactic reclamation, he was obliged to stride among the stars in the guise of a warrior king, armored in gold, for that was the version of him that his young sons best understood. He had to seem like them, yet more glorious, so he could command their loyalty, their respect, and even their devotion. It was war, so he became warlike. They would not have followed him otherwise or obeyed his instructions. They would have doubted. He needed to be able to command them to the very ends of the stars, to secure their obedience across unimaginable distances and sustain unswerving devotion even after he had left them. So he played that card. The Emperor. It was a version of himself that he found quite odious. But they rejoiced in it. They saw what they wanted to see. His sons committed utterly to the material war, and were so fortified and resolute that he felt he could leave the completion of the work to them. Because he had to return. Time had never been his ally. He had to leave his children to conclude the material war among the stars and return to his seat underground. For not only the material war had to be fought, the immaterial war had to be fought as well. One victory was nothing without the other. After Ulanor, he set that guise aside with relief. He set aside the plate, the helm, the incomparable blade, believing he would not need the aspect of the War King again, for he had left the material war in their capable hands. In the hands of his chosen successor, his sons. I suppose they are my sons too, in a way, for I helped to make and shape them. The current pain of his immaterial toil is nothing compared to the pain of his grief. He is only human, after all. I lament, likewise. We both knew his sons would die, one day, one by one, casualties of the great work, for his configuration of tomorrow could not be accomplished without collateral loss. When he marked out his plan upon his wall for me, so that I could grasp the scope of it, he allowed for contingency and redundancy. If a son fell, there would be another to take his place. Even so, we thought they would last for centuries, or even millennia, a great dynasty devoted to the accomplishments of his designs. For, from the very start, paint on his fingers, he knew that he could not do it alone. Thus we made sons for him. We believed that when the necessary wars were done, some of these sons and their father would enjoy the long peace together, and they would walk alongside him towards tomorrow. Those sons, at least, who could be rehabilitated from the brutal mindset of warfare. But the gods are against him. The false gods, the false four. They have been trying to thwart him since he began his work, for they know that his success will signal the end of them. Fearing his version of tomorrow, they have turned against him and undone the laws of the world. We have known disappointments before, failures, setbacks. Many times we have been forced to revise and fashion a modified path around an obstruction. One does not sustain a plan across 30 millennia without a degree of flexibility. We have known defeats, but not this. His plan is damaged. I'm not sure if we can salvage it and set it back in motion. There is a lot to unravel here. Melkador shares a lot of insane information. This could honestly almost be its own video, but for this video, I want you to focus on the legions part. They were never meant to last. At some point, humanity would be done with the war in the Materium, which is the material universe, and the Immaterium, which refers to the warp. The end plan needed no Astartes, only a happy humanity, safely away from everyone, ruling a plane of existence with no more interference from anybody, besides the Emperor and Melkador, of course. But we aren't done yet with the Primarch part of this story. The Emperor made a very specific mistake with them, which somehow was the exact same mistake as he made with the Perpetuals. His plans would have succeeded if he had learned from the first time. Let's take a look at the Emperor's mistake, which in the end damned this plan. The Emperor's vision was perhaps the greatest thing any human had ever dreamt of, and the Emperor had the mightiest people mankind would ever spawn by his side. Melkador, the last member of the mysterious Sigillite Order, the Custodes who were loyal to the extreme, yet still capable of voicing their opinions, the Primarchs, the Astartes legions, the Martian Mechanicum, the Saturnine Ordos, the High Lords of Terra, and once even a multitude of Perpetuals. When Urda talked about the Emperor in past millennia, she explained it best. The master of mankind, or Nield as she knew him, he was hard not to love. Urda and many perpetuals adored him, and the Emperor wanted to unite them before he could set his eyes on the rest of mankind. While many willingly joined, others refused, and a couple even outright opposed the Emperor. Some of the greatest wars fought on Terra were because of the Emperor battling these perpetuals. The perpetuals, however, would also be the first to ever turn their back on the Emperor. His powers were so far beyond them that they found it impossible to keep up with him. The perpetuals grew tired of the Emperor, his ruthlessness and arrogance causing them to leave one after another. He never wanted their advice, and he was right about everything, which only bred resentment and a smoldering hatred. The Emperor did not tolerate anyone questioning his plan, and he was glad these lesser minds began to leave. For Urda herself, the final straw was the Emperor's acceleration of the human genome. For humanity to evolve into what should have taken millions of years, but for the Emperor, that took too long. He created the Trademarks to replace the perpetuals, and somehow had a hand in evolving humanity faster and faster. But in the Emperor's rush, he ended up making the same mistake with the Trademarks as he had done with the perpetuals. In the grand scheme of things, the Trademarks were beings who had only lived for a handful of centuries, and essentially were children compared to the intellect of the perpetuals. They didn't have similar experiences as their father. They hadn't lived through Old Night. They had no wisdom of chaos. They were corruptible. They were not as perfect as the Emperor and Malcador had hoped. In truth, it was so bad that the leader of mankind created 20 Trademarks to allow for redundancies. Yet he, the master of mankind, was completely blindsided by the corruption of chaos. He had planned for many things. He knew some of the Trademarks would die, and he knew others would betray him. But he could never have foreseen just how devastating the Horus Heresy would be. And by treating the Trademarks like he had done the perpetuals, I personally believe that he essentially put too much trust into his demigod sons. Essentially, what if he thought they were more resilient than they really were? They were made from the warp, as we see in Era of Ruin. Maybe he thought that gave them an edge. We will never really know, sadly, but it seems like the Emperor just did things this way. His arrogance and personal rush to experience a perfectly evolved humanity getting in the way of his personal judgment, resulting in, well, rushed mistakes. He expects too much. Essentially, he believes people are more like him than they really are. Out of all Trademarks, the Emperor was most surprised by the betrayal of Horus and Magnus. Horus makes sense. It was his favorite son, and that betrayal was a real heartbreaker. But Magnus was a betrayal that not only hurt the Emperor, but destroyed over half of his grand plan. The webway had been breached by Magnus, trying to warn his father. The human webway was in shambles, and even though cities were still being constructed, it became questionable if it was even worth it to try and recover. The situation has become so hopeless that the Emperor, for the first time since he created his Adeptus Custodes, has no more ideas for the future. His plans shattered, he no longer knows what to do, as seen in Master of Mankind. The Emperor turned to him, his eyes focusing on the Custodian for the first time. The war is over, Diocletian. Win or lose, Horus has damned us all. Mankind will share in his ignorance until the last man or woman draws the species' last breath. The warp will forever be a cancer in the heart of all humans. The Imperium may last 100 years, or 1,000, or 10,000, but it will fall, Diocletian. It will fall. The shining path is lost to us. Now we rage against the dying of the light. It cannot be this way. Diocletian stepped forwards, teeth clenched. It cannot. The Emperor tilted his head. No? What then do you intend to do, Custodian? How will you, with your spear and your fury and your loyalty, pull fate itself from its repeating path? "We will kill Horus." Diocletian stared at his defeated monarch, illuminated in embarrassed light of the lumoglobe in his hand. "And after the war, we can begin anew. We can purge the webway. The unifiers can rebuild all that was lost, even if it takes centuries. We will strike Horus down, and I will face the 16th. The Emperor interrupted, distracted once more by the machine graveyard. "But there will come another to take his place. I see that now. It is the way of things. The enemy will never abate. Another will come. One who will doubtlessly learn from Horus's errors of fate and judgment." "Who, my king?" The Emperor shook his head. "There is no way to know, and for now it is meaningless. But remember it well. We are not the only ones learning from this conflict. Our enemies grow wiser too." Diocletian refused to concede. "You are the Emperor of mankind. We will conquer any who come against us. After the war, we will rebuild under your guidance." The Emperor stared at him. He spoke a question that wasn't a question, one that brooked no answer. "And what if I am gone, Diocletian?" The custodian had no answer. Thunder pealed above them, shaking the cavern and jarring loose a rattling hail of falling pebble dust. "My king, what now? What comes next?" The Emperor turned away, walking into the darkness of the cavern while the storm hammered the dead city so far above. He spoke 3 words that no custodian had ever heard him speak before. "I don't know." Now let's take a step back and take another look at Malcador the Sigillite, or the hero as he became known after. He was also aware that their vision of the future included some massive mistakes, a problem they didn't see until it was far too late. As we saw with Malcador earlier in the video, the Imperium was never meant to be created for or ruled over by the Astartes or their Primarchs. Don't forget, Malcador does admit that not everything he says is the truth, so take this information with a grain of salt. I personally, seeing the other sources we have covered so far, do believe that the Sigillite is not actually lying, essentially as he does with other unfortunate characters throughout the heresy, sharing secrets and regrets the moment he gets the chance, just to let it slide off his own shoulders, as seen in Malcador, the First Lord of Terra. "Rest, Cybele, lie back. Would it comfort you if I were to say that the Primarchs, all of them, are but a means to an end? I do not understand, forgive me. The Imperium is not for the posthumans, but for mankind. You know this, you helped me to manage them, to direct their efforts. The legions and their sires are conquerors' tools, and nothing more." "You mean the Thunder Warriors?" "Like them. Burning brightly but briefly. But the Emperor and I could not conduct the Great Crusade without Genhansed mortals. We needed something greater, something stronger to reclaim the stars. And in order to control it, we needed a lifespan of the Legion Astartes that had nothing to do with aging or timed infirmity. Believe when I say it, Cybele Nyasta, this was always intended to be the final act of the crusade. We wanted the Primarchs to turn against each other, against their father. Amongst them, there were multiple redundancies, and some were outright preyed on to betray the Emperor one day. But does this mean that the Horus heresy was planned from the start? The answer is surprisingly no, as once again seen in the audio drama Malcador, First Lord of Terra. He straight up admits the following: "My failure was in underestimating the true enemy. The ruinous powers have emboldened their champions. The ruinous powers have emboldened their champions among the 18, and the war began before we were ready. And so, every tell of that bell gives me pause to question, was this death one we intended? Or yet another innocent soul I might have saved? That is my burden to bear, and I do so that the Emperor may concentrate on the final battle to come." While the Horus heresy was not planned, the Emperor and Malcador did expect a civil war one day. But if they expected a civil war amongst the Primarchs, how come they were so wrong in thinking what would happen? Well, the answer to that lies in how foresight actually works. Malcador is a powerful psyker, but he does not possess the gift of foresight. The Emperor, on the other hand, does have this gift, but it is something that does not tell you every detail on how that future actually unfolds, only that it exists. In Master of Mankind, we explore many of the Emperor's thoughts and visions through Ra and Endymion. Imagine for a moment, you are standing on an island, and at the edge of the horizon, you can see another island. You see the shore, you know it is there, and you know it is possible to reach it. But how do you reach it? Do you swim? Do you go by ship or by flight? When you begin the journey, you can only see the destination, but not what dangers lurk beneath the deep blue. Will the wind blow you away? And if so, will it be east, west, north or south? To put it simply, there are an extreme number of variables not even the Emperor can prepare for. When one future slips away, another comes into sight. That is the nature of foresight, a trillion possibilities with near infinite ways to arrive at each one. And for the Emperor, the Horus Heresy is a violent storm that would throw him off course. What the Emperor and Malcador expected was that half of the Primarchs would become traitors one day, and they had planned for this. This is why Angron was left to suffer. This is why Lorgar was punished for his fate and never thought about the truth he was so desperate to seek out. This is why Conrad Curse was left anguished in his endless nightmares. What use would the Emperor have with a bitter Perturabo when he has a prideful Dorn right there? Perhaps the loathing of Mortarion was planted by the Emperor from the very beginning. This does leave us with a burning question though. While the Emperor could not have known who would stay loyal and who would turn traitor, he did have a canonical lineup he preferred to stay around after the Great Crusade. Now, this is raw speculation and theory, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. But let's think for a moment about which Primarchs were arguably the most disposable, and which Primarchs the Emperor really wanted to keep. The aforementioned Angron, Lorgar, Curse, Perturabo and Mortarion arguably were very disposable. But who would the other 4 traitors be? Let's go through a process of elimination and make a list of those whom the Emperor counted on for staying loyal. Lionel Johnson, Leman Russ, Rogel Dorn, Rabute Gilliman, Horus Lupercal, Magnus, Sanguinius, Corvus Corax and Vulcan are the Primarchs I suspect the Emperor wanted to stay loyal. Hell, the Emperor even mentions Rabute and the Lion specifically in Vengeful Spirit, that he 100% believes they will stay loyal. This does leave Fulgrim, Pharismanus, Alpharius and Jagatai Khan on an iffy side. I personally believe that these guys were just extras, just in case any of the other Primarchs failed to fulfill their set purpose. Like I said, this is just my personal guess after reading and interacting with nearly every single piece of Horus Heresy lore written in the last 2 decades. But I would genuinely love to hear who you guys think would have betrayed the Imperium if Chaos was never involved. It is important to note that the Emperor does know without a shadow of a doubt that half of the Primarchs would have betrayed him either way, no matter how he prepares or what he plans to do. So post your theoretical list down in the comment section below. I would love to see what you guys come up with. To summarize everything we have learned today and give an easy and less convoluted answer to what the Emperor's plan for after the Great Crusade was, humanity has the potential to become the strongest species in the universe. Their potential for psychic ability, even when it is just in its first stages of evolution, is something that can easily rival that of the Eldar, and indeed spawn a galaxy-ending Chaos God. The Perpetuals had seen this, and so had Malcador and the Emperor. So it is that the Emperor, beloved by all, has deemed himself fit to be the master of mankind and guide them into a prosperous future with no risks. The Emperor was determined to learn from the mistakes of the Eldar and went about his plan the way we know it. Not only did humanity have to rid itself of the navigators and astropaths, but it would have to turn the webway into a new home. By doing this, not only does the Emperor secure human dominance, but also ensures the starvation of the Chaos Gods. Within the webway, the Emperor could ensure no one could fall to the temptations of the warp. And within this, even some of the Primarchs have their place. Sanguinius, Guilliman, Dorn, and even Perturabo, if he had stayed loyal, could have built a paradise within the webway to call home. Even the Trefoil, Leman Russ, Vulcan and Alvarius, alongside their legions, which the Emperor kept in reserve on Terra, perhaps would have found an even greater purpose. Those Primarchs who would have stayed true to the Emperor no longer would have been generals, warlords and destroyers of worlds. Instead, they would have become builders, protectors and architects. But at the end of the day, the most important part of the Emperor's vision is that it was not for himself, but for humanity. The Emperor never wanted to become a god. He never wanted to be the God Emperor, Carrion Lord of the Imperium. All the Emperor wanted was peace and prosperity for humanity, and of course, to have his arrogance stroked at times. But the Horus Heresy changed that. Now, godhood was necessary. The means to an end now became the end itself. He is forced to fight fire with fire, and worst of all, in the grim darkness of the far future, humanity knows only war. When the Emperor began his master plan to reconquer the galaxy in the name of human dominion, he very quickly came across a massive problem. He could not do it himself, so he would have to go out of his way and make 20 demigod sons, alongside 20 biologically engineered superhuman legions, to conquer the entire galaxy in an acceptable time frame. However, to make these Primarch sons, a deal with an ancient evil had to be made. The Emperor wanted to ascend humanity into a time of prosperity and immortality. Chaos and the Warp were his greatest enemies, but in this time of conquest, a deal had to be struck. The Emperor traveled to Molag, entered the gate deep underneath an ancient cavern, and made a deal with Chaos. He would receive the fire of the warp, like the fire stolen by Prometheus in ancient Greek mythology, and in return, he would inform humanity of the power of chaos, so they too could serve the ancient primordial annihilator. The Emperor came back, he had the fire and created 20 sons. He made his space marines and he conquered the galaxy in what is known as the Great Crusade. But instead of holding his end of the deal, the Emperor betrayed the Chaos Gods. He used their fire, but informed no one of chaos. Not just that, he went out of his way to outlaw any and all religions, cults, churches and spiritual gatherings. Chaos would have no handhold in this reality. Yet Chaos is not stupid, it's a malign and evil prescience that noticed this betrayal. Through the likes of Erebus, Lorgar and Horus, half the sons of the Emperor were turned against him. The galaxy would be informed of the existence of Chaos, and in his hubris of betraying the Chaos Gods, the galaxy would burn. So would the Emperor have been better off if he had informed his sons of his deal with Chaos and the general existence of gods? Would they have listened to him, taken his warnings of their malign evil, understood the sacrifice he made, and stayed on his side to fulfill his dreams? Or would this revelation have sent the likes of Horus into such utter despair that they would have turned traitor anyway? Alright, with that dramatic introduction out of the way, let's get into part 1. What did the Emperor lie about? Was it to protect us, or was there something more to it? To answer this question, I am immediately opening up with an amazing excerpt from the first Heretic. In this novel, Argoltal is sent out by Lorgar to the Eye of Terror to discover if there are more gods besides the false Emperor. After entering the Eye, Argoltal and his crew are essentially frozen in time for what feels like an eternity. They become hungry and start eating crew members. They become thirsty, so they start sipping blood, engine fuel and coolants. But as this desperation hits, demons start to visit them. Right as Argoltal is about to return to Lorgar with his revelations that the gods of chaos are real, he is hit with a vision by the demon known as Ingetel. The question we must ask ourselves, Chaplain Zaven spoke as he stroked the surface of the pot marked 17, is why these incubators are shielded against, say it, Zaven smiled, against demons. Torgal joined the chaplain before Lorgar's pod. He stared inside at the slumbering infant for some time. I believe I know. These children are almost grown to the point of birth. Demon? Spirit? I am here. Torgal looked acutely uncomfortable interacting with the disembodied voice. The legions tell the tale of the Emperor's 20 sons being cast into the heavens by some great tragedy, some flaw in their creation process. You have been raised with the tales of the Primarchs that lead your legions, but you have been fed centuries of lies. In a matter of moments, you will witness the truth. The Anathema dealt with the powers of the Warp long before he left Earth on the Great Crusade. The Anathema desired mighty sons, and the gods granted him the lore to forge them with a union of divine genetics and psychic sorcery. He came to my masters, hungry for answers, beseeching the gods for power. With the lore they gave him, he shaped his 20 sons. But treacheries have occurred. Oaths, sworn in blood and paid in soul, have been broken. The Anathema now refuses to show humanity the primordial truth, and the gods of the Warp grow wrathful. The Anathema is keeping its 20 Primarch sons, and paying no price to the powers that gifted him with the knowledge to shape them. Zaven gripped the handrail to keep going to his knees. Our father, all of our fathers, are the spawn of ancient blood rituals and forbidden science. Argoltal couldn't keep from laughing. The Emperor that denies all forms of divinity shaped his own sons with the blessing of forgotten gods. Prayers and sorcery are written upon their gestation pods. This is the most glorious madness. So yeah, that is the first in-lore reaction to figuring it out. Holy damn, the Emperor used chaos to make the Primarchs. He stole their power, and like a hypocrite, immediately banned religion right after. The Imperial Truth preached that there are no gods. The Great Crusade was about bringing illumination to the far corners of the galaxy. Now this very crusade was afraid of knowledge. The more warriors like Garfield Loken learned, the more they and others questioned. The Emperor held his subjects in a tight noose of control and lies, and those who knew too much might accidentally disappear once the Sigillites' attention fell onto them. So the Emperor definitely tried to hide this deal. He knew something that nobody else knew, and maybe he had actual good reasons for that. Because think about it. If the Emperor were to inform the entire galaxy of the existence of chaos, wouldn't billions of people immediately switch sides? If you heard of a real-life power that could make you the richest, sexiest, strongest or smartest man alive, wouldn't you take it? Well, before we go down that rabbit hole, there is another side to this theory that we need to discuss before I can give a full and coherent answer. Did the Emperor lie for his own power? As in, did he lie so he would be the only one in existence with this level of power and knowledge? While I have covered this story in depth in my How Strong is the Emperor video, let's just say he is capable of exterminating a planet full of super powerful orcs with his psychic might alone. The Emperor didn't really need this power at all. He was already strong enough by himself. But yes, the Emperor did lie about how strong he actually was. Later, during the heresy, when the siege of Terra was nearing its end, the Emperor of Mankind boarded the Vengeful Spirit. He was growing with power, and it was enough to make the ancient Four Gods flinch in pain. The Emperor had stolen their fire, used it to keep them at bay for millennia, and now, when forced to confront them, he would burn them. For the Emperor, being in the warp, surrounded by chaos and made to fight it, was no different than pouring fuel onto a fire. This display of power was so raw and fiery that even one of the elite Heteran Custodes Guard thought to himself, "So this is hell." We even learned that after the titanic clash between Horus and the Emperor ended, the warp was calmed. The Master of Mankind was dying, Horus was utterly devastated, and the Chaos Gods themselves were so wounded they fell into a deep sleep. From this, we can pretty accurately say that the Emperor lied about his power so the Chaos Gods would be caught off guard by what he could actually do. If nobody, not the Primarchs, Chaos Gods, or hell, even the Custodes, knew what he was truly capable of, he could pull out a victory in the worst of circumstances. But years before this fight between Horus and the Emperor, Horus had already been warned of this power, and in his eyes, it wasn't about defeating chaos, it was about ego. He wanted to ensure that Horus could never surpass him. At least, that is what a disguised Erebus told him, as seen in False Gods. "He would never do such a thing," Horus cried out loud. "You underestimate his lust for power, my friend," said the disguised Erebus as they made their way back towards the steps that led them down into the laboratory floor. "The gods of the warp are powerful, but they do not understand this material universe, and the Emperor was able to betray them, stealing away their power for himself. In creating you, he passed on but a tiny measure of that power." Horus felt his breath come in short, painful bursts. He wanted to deny the Marine's words, but part of him knew that this was no lie. Like any other man, his future was uncertain, but his past had always been his own. His glories in life had been forged with his own two hands, but even now, they were being stripped away from him by the Emperor's treachery. "So we are tainted," whispered Horus, "all of us." "Tainted? No," said the fixed Janus, shaking his head. "The power of the warp simply is. Used wisely and by a man of power, it can be a weapon like no other. It can be mastered, and it can be a powerful tool for one with the will to use it." "Then why did the Emperor not use it well?" "Because he was weak," said Sejanus, leaning in close to Horus. "Unlike you, he lacked the will to master it, and the gods of the warp do not take kindly to those who betray them. The Emperor has taken a measure of their power for himself, but they struck back at him. How? You will see. With the power he stole from them, he was too powerful for them to attack directly, but they had foreseen a measure of his plans, and they struck at what he needed most to realize those plans." "The Primarchs?" "The Primarchs," agreed Sejanus. Erebus had woven a convincing story, a powerful tale of the deepest betrayals. Horus was no mere man, however. He was not a normal being you could deceive. At first, the War Master was glad to see his beloved son, but he was quick to realize it was not actually Sejanus, and by the time his brother Magnus arrived, Horus had already made his decision. Neither Erebus nor Magnus could hold sway over Horus. On the one hand, he was a brother who, by his presence, broke the Emperor's edicts. What words of loyalty uttered by Magnus can hold true weight if he himself is not loyal? And what lies of the serpent Erebus could ever be convincing? Horus would see one brutal truth, however. The Emperor had lied. Between the lies of Chaos, the lies of his father, and the hypocrisy of Magnus, which side would be the closest to the truth? Well, to Horus, the closest truth would be that of Chaos. Entities so powerful powerful that he agreed with the word bearers that there is no better word for them than gods. Horus would continue to unravel the truth as he began his heresy. From Molech to Terra, the War Master found no truth, as truth is often the very first casualty of war. Instead, he found the supremacy and utter annihilation of chaos. Horus was the most warlike Primarch. He might lack the wrath of Angron, brutal intelligence of Perturabo, or unbreakable will of Dorn, but he was still chosen to be the War Master. Horus sided with those he believed could win. When Leman Russ stabbed him with the Dionysian spear, there was no illumination to bring to Horus. Molech and Davin had already done that for him. To Horus, the Emperor was nothing but a magician, a man selling tricks and lies. During Horus's confrontation with Garfield Loken, who came to understand the Emperor better than any other Astartes, Loken would praise the Emperor for being a magician. The art was to make the impossible look easy, to put on a show, while behind the scenes, everything was makeshift and on the edge of falling apart. The Emperor lied about his power, but his lies were to protect the very soul of mankind. Later, during the End in the Depth Volume 3, Loken would try to convince his father once again of the Emperor's righteous decisions to lie about chaos. But once again, Horus would not hear it. "Chaos will spare no one," says Loken. "Chaos cares not. You are a puppet of its whim. It has beguiled you simply to perform one deed, to remove the one man it feared. Yes, the Emperor stole fire from Chaos and used its power against it, but he always knew that he could not take it whole, for it would consume him. You mocked him for lacking the courage to do what you have done, but it wasn't a lack of courage, it was an act of supreme will. You have embraced Chaos whole and thus given exactly what it wanted. You have no power of your own, you think you do, but it's just an illusion. He opposed Chaos at every turn, and rejected every lie and promise it threw at him, of improvisation and persistence. So his life, like his fight with you, was a scrappy, messy brawl of persistence. You have accepted them all, which is why your path seems so strong and clear. It is, you ungrateful fool. Then show it to me, tell me what it is. I have nothing to prove to you. Not to me, to yourself. Make no mistake, that is what you told me years ago. Make no mistake. Well, father, see your own mistake for what it is. Your path is a grim darkness, where there is only war and no place for mankind. There is no mistake. Look at me, Loken. See what I am. He cries and claps his hand against his chest. I am made mighty beyond all measure by the warp. I am transfigured and ascendant. I am a god, boy. A mighty god. And gods do not make mistakes. We are mighty because we are right. We are not right because we are mighty. Val the hour when that reversal becomes our credo. So Horus, Loken, Lorgar and Magnus figured it out very early on. The Emperor had stolen power from Chaos, and had used it to make the Primarchs, but then refused to uphold his part of the deal. But as we saw, every person in the setting has a wildly different reaction to this revelation. So what did the other Primarchs know? And if they did know, why didn't they tell any of their brothers? Or did they realize that the Emperor was right not to tell anyone? In the novel Lost in the Damned, we learn from Malcador that only one of the Primarchs was ever told about Chaos. During this conversation, Sanguinius, Dorn and the Khan question who it is. They quickly find out it is none of those present. Sanguinius tried to reason that if more of the Primarchs were told, then so much could have been prevented. Malcador, however, quickly reminds him that there was room for one more Red Angel among the forces of Chaos. Words that made Sanguinius visibly turn pale. Just a quick reminder for those who may have forgotten, Erebus concocted a plan to turn Sanguinius into a demon known as the Red Angel, a plan Sanguinius actually fell for, but by the heroic actions of an apothecary named Meros, Sanguinius was spared from this dark fate. And yes, Sanguinius deeply understands the sacrifice of his son and just how close he came to falling to chaos. But what do the other Primarchs know? We will be skipping Horus as we already covered him in depth. Lorgar is also a Primarch we can skip, as he discovered chaos during the novel First Heretic. But to keep in line with the traitor Primarchs first, let's continue with Magnus. We know that Magnus was relentless in his pursuit of chaos, and we know that the first time he made proper contact with it, he, out of desperation, immediately accepted its gifts. Sure, the situation was rather drastic. He was trying to save his legion from a genetic disease. But then a couple of centuries later, he does it again when he's trying to contact the Emperor after Horus falls to chaos. So no matter what, if Magnus was told of chaos, he would have fallen nearly immediately due to his own hubris. This is also definitely a factor as to why he was banned from using sorcery by the Emperor. Perturabo, Angron and Curse are also Primarchs who would not have been told. Let's be honest here, Angron genuinely does not care. He also doesn't like his librarians, even though he did not disband them after Nicaea. Perturabo was also not told. As we know, he outright hates chaos every time he sees it during the heresy. He underestimates it on nearly every occasion, and by the end of the Scouring, he would even try to master it and control it like a weapon. Conrad Curse, on the other hand, is a highly troubled individual and would blame the Emperor for everything that has happened, so telling him would just make this worse. On to our next three Primarchs, Mortarion, Fulgrim and Alpharius. Mortarion definitely was not told. Much like Perturabo, he has a strong contempt for anything sorcerous in nature, and both during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, he tried to get the Emperor and Warmaster to ban its use. When it comes to the remaining traitor Primarchs, this only leaves us with Alpharius, who I consider a serious candidate, but I want to cover him together with a more loyalist candidate. Fulgrim, on the other hand, could have also been an interesting contender. However, his actions during the early Horus Heresy, especially surrounding Isfahan, shows me that he had no idea, and so was not told. Fulgrim willingly let his sons be mutilated, falls under the influence of a throbbing sword, and when confronted by a demon, he feels nothing but the misery of having killed Ferrus Manus. Moving on to the Loyalists, we already went over Sanguinius, Dorn and Jagatai Khan, where Malcador outright states that none of them have been told. So starting with Robute Guilliman, Ferrus Manus and Vulcan. Obviously, Robute Guilliman understood very little of the warp, both when the heresy began, during and after. When fighting the Wordbearers at Cult, he was woefully under-equipped to fight them. He and the Ultramarines had to learn how to combat chaos through trial and error. Vulcan is another Primarch I would argue was left in the dark, due to his reaction when he entered the Webway. He has a lot of issues with what the Emperor made. It was crude, done too fast, and had way too many shortcuts. I think that if Vulcan was told of chaos, he would have had a very different reaction to what he saw and experienced, and maybe he would even have brought it up to Curse. Ferrus Manus, I want to argue, is very much like Dorn, in that he is a master of the Materium. When Dorn and Malcador talk about the warp, Malcador points out that if Dorn were told, he would have fallen to it. Not because he is weak or has a flaw, but because it was not what he was created for. Dorn would try to master the warp as though it was the Immaterium, and this is a pathway to insanity. What is also important to know is that when Sanguinius spoke to Ferrus Manus aboard the Vengeful Spirit, the Gorgon seemed to have learned of chaos the hard way, and he did not like it. Now onto the last three Loyalist Primarchs. which I think all have a good claim for being told about chaos. Starting with Corvus Corax, there are two arguments I have that are pro and one that sadly disproves everything. The first argument is that Corax was the only Primarch to distrust Horus and outright hit him once because Horus was willing to sacrifice the Raven Guard for his own glory. As a whole, Corax was rather critical of his brothers. He was willing to work with them and trust them, but at the same time, he seemed overly suspicious of all of them. Another pro-argument is the trust between Corax and the Emperor in the novel Deliverance Lost. While not truly transparent, Corax was given the knowledge and tools to resurrect his legion, something which only went south because of the Alpha Legion. Yet both of these arguments fall apart when we look at what Corax does and sees through the Horus Heresy. He is surprised at every turn, he hates chaos with a passion, but he has no idea on how to actually fight it. And when the heresy ends, it takes him many millennia inside the warp to realize how truly powerful he actually is. Moving on to Leman Russ. Among the Primarchs, few had the same relation with the Emperor as Leman Russ. He was not the first found like Horus, he was not the first created Primarch like Lion, nor was he chosen to be the Praetorian of Terra like Dorn, but he served as the Emperor's executioner. When the Emperor and Great Crusade had to face one of the worst enemies in existence, known as the Rangdan, Russ was right up there with Lion to fight them. And it's also good to remember, the Space Wolves being called the Emperor's executioners is not an honor. It is an insult and a dark reminder of the Rangdan genocides from when Russ's legion executed potentially corrupted Imperials. Russ was also trusted to arrest Magnus and given the Dionysian spear I mentioned earlier. But was Russ told of chaos? I don't think so, because he made a lot of mistakes and had no idea that Horus was corrupted by the Chaos Gods. Russ was tricked into attacking Magnus not only by Horus, but also by the direct involvement of the Chaos Gods, tricking him into thinking that Magnus was spying on him. Russ tried to send a message to Magnus that he was willing to ignore the orders of Horus as long as Magnus came out and surrendered himself directly. But it was not a spy of Magnus, it was all a massive misdirection, so the message was never sent. Russ also hesitated with his fight against Horus. While there was much love between them, if Russ understood chaos, I don't think he would have hesitated. Another thing to point out was that Russ, at the end of the heresy, believed himself to be an utter failure, which required the Emperor himself to cheer him back up. So now that we have covered all of that, let's talk about who, in my opinion, were trusted with knowing about chaos. I first want to talk about Lion L. Johnson. We all know why the Emperor created the Dark Angels. This legion was created to not just defeat, but to outright destroy an enemy, to the point history remembers nothing but their name. Lion L. Johnson also once shared with one of his sons how, in his dreams, beasts come and offer him things. To name but one example was the title of War Master, to be the first among equals. He reflected on these dreams after being offered help by the Alpha Legion during the Rangdan genocides, which would see the Lion become War Master in the future. Although a captain was willing to accept this offer, the Lion was not. He told his son that the offers in his dreams change, but his answer never does. When taking into account that the Lion came from Caliban, which was infested by the Warp, is it too hard to believe that the Lion was told about chaos? He even read some of the books held by the Knights of Lupus, who had fallen to chaos. If we also add the event from Lion Son of the Forest, it seems pretty clear what the answer is. Just a quick reminder, the Lion during this novel outright forgives any of the fallen who have not given into chaos and executes those who have, Personally, I think we might get to see more evidence of this as the Scouring series unfolds, and as we get to hopefully see more of the Lion in the modern era. So yeah, the Lion is a strong contender, but the Scouring will give us any actual proof if this is the case, which leaves us with two more brothers, Alfarius and Omegon. I primarily want to talk about the novels Legion and Alfarius Head of the Hydra, starting with Alfarius Head of the Hydra. This novel claims that Alfarius was never swept away like his brothers, something he also says is a lie, but it is here that Legion comes in. In this novel, Alfarius and Omegon speak to the Cabal, a Xenos organization that is seeking to let Horus win, and through that, have chaos turn in on itself, destroy humanity, and then destroy itself. Alfarius and Omegon are not convinced that to beat chaos, Horus has to win. If Horus loses, what we see in 40K is still going to happen. But not just that, another 10,000 years into the future, the galaxy will face utter primordial annihilation. While not outright stated, it seems that they believe the Dark King will ascend in 10 to 20,000 years after the heresy, and will then destroy everything. But what does this mean for our heroes? Well, because the Alpha Legion are highly mysterious, quick on the double crossing, and the fact that the Cabal was destroyed by Eldrad, it's kind of a mess if you ask me. On one hand, you could argue that one or both Primarchs were taught about chaos, and that they were not corrupted, but instead convinced to join the Cabal, which could be a decision fueled by their understanding of chaos. But on the other hand, you could argue that it is because the Alpha Legion do not understand chaos, that they were convinced to join the Cabal to find out. While I personally lean more towards Lionel Johnson as the one who was taught about chaos, I still think the Alpha Legion have a very good shot at it as well. I would love to hear what you guys think about this dilemma down in the comment section below. Who do you think was outright told about chaos by the Emperor and Malcador? Also, quick mention, the reason the Lost Primarchs are not included in this list is that Malcador would not even have brought them up if that were the case. When a younger Horus once tried to utter one of his Lost Brothers' names, he was immediately choked to near death by the Sigillite. Now moving on, what did the Chaos Gods think of this betrayal, of their deal with the Emperor? Do we have any in-lore examples of their actual opinions on him? When Horus fights the Emperor, the leader of mankind says a handful of things that betray how he truly feels. He repeatedly asks Horus, why? As in, why did you betray me? Why did you join chaos? Something the traitor finds confounding and even frustrating. The master of mankind even says, "You killed my son," which Horus thinks means Sanguinius, but in truth, he meant not just Sanguinius, but Horus, Ferrus, all of them taken away by the Chaos Gods. Perhaps the best example of just how much the Emperor screwed over chaos can be seen in Mortis. It is noon in the desert. It has been noon here for all time. It is fixed at that point, at the idea of heat beating down and light giving no room for shadows. The eyes of the man beneath the tree have closed to slits. Above him, the dry branches of the tree rattle. His shape here is not truth. It is just a reflection of his nature at that moment. Pain and suffering, and the relentless hammer of vast forces crushing in on him. His skin is a parchment pulled thin across his skull. Cracks have opened on his brow and cheeks. Dried blisters cling to his lips. He has not moved for a long time, longer than a lifetime. The scoop in the ground, where water rose from the tree roots, is dry. There is a realm of thirst now. There is no water anymore. Just his will pushing against the idea of this desert, holding it back from him and the only tree that gives it any shade. The rattle of the first snake rises into the air. The man's eyes open a fraction wider. The serpent sits on the cracked earth. Its head is raised, its black eyes unblinking. As the man looks at it, a tongue flicks out to taste the air. Its scales are blue, the color of an ocean under under the sun. It flicks its tail, and then the dry rattle rises. The man meets its gaze. From behind the serpent, the head of another rises. The scales of this one are green of summer forest, and the light draws a gleam of copper from a bone crest. It hisses. The fangs inside its pink mouth are black, needle splinters of night. Another hiss, and the man has to open his eyes and turn to see the third and fourth shapes gliding over the ground behind him. There will be 2 more, he knows, lying still, out of sight, coiled in the dust, like a promise that is in truth a threat. Horus begins to speak, demanding to know why his father lied. He has so much to say, but the man beneath the tree does not listen, his attention focused on the serpents. The man beneath the tree opens his mouth, skin splits on his lips. "You have lied to him," he says, and the voice holds no crack or note of the wasting that marks his face. His eyes are on the serpents, and they rear up at the words, mouths open, fangs showing, eyes black pearls in the glare. "When he sees what you have made him, there will be nothing left of him for you. Nothing. You create only hollow things. You make a desolation of hope, and a wasteland of the future." The man beneath the tree coughs, the sound a rattle in a dry throat. "He shall undo you. I made him. I know him, his strengths and his flaws. To you he's only a slave, but he is still my son." Horus grows enraged with his father, but the Emperor would rise, beat back the gods with fire, and declare to them that all of this shall end. And it has. Well, the Horus heresy at least. As revenge, the Chaos Gods took half of the Emperor's sons, shattered his dreams, and practically killed him. To this very day, they continue to wage war into eternity. Untold trillions march to their deaths, their feet following the tune of the laughter of thirsting gods. Even in the 42nd millennium, the Chaos Gods are far from done with humanity, its master and all of his creations. And they remember the promise, they want their payment, and they will get it, no matter what it might cost. And so we conclude our story. The great lie of the Emperor and almost all of its consequences have played out. Now the story will continue by those who inherited this broken Imperium. Where will Rabute Gilliman and Lionel Johnson lead the Imperium? Will they create a lasting golden age? Will they tell humanity of the deal the Emperor made? Or will they only make the long death of humanity last even longer? It's hard to tell. Everything I learned while researching this video left me with more questions than answers. One thing that I can conclude, however, is that the Emperor could not tell his sons or the Imperium about chaos. To have done so would have given the ruinous powers everything they wanted, instead of forcing them to fight and squabble for what was promised to them so long ago. In a way, by the Emperor not telling humanity of their existence, he made the Chaos Gods blame each other for this betrayal, taking their attention away from our reality. To start our deep dive into the Dark King, we first have to understand what a Chaos God is, and how they actually work. Because no, they aren't gods, like in mythology, or the supreme annihilators the servants of chaos would like to make you believe. Gods in 40k work differently, and while I've already explained how they are formed and work in my 8 Chaos God video, I will give a small explainer here in case you didn't see that video, and if you did, see it as a quick lore refresher. In the novel Betrayer, Magnus and Lorgar briefly speak about the pantheon of chaos, bringing some rather interesting arguments for each perspective. To Magnus, the Chaos Gods are sentient storms, and terms like god or demon are wrong, essentially a filler word for lesser, blunter species. Lorgar, on the other hand, argued that those words are as good as any other, and in all honesty, they are both correct, because what people say and believe holds power in 40k. 10,000 years later, Fabius Bile has his own experience with a god, Slanesh specifically. Well, one of its direct messengers, but the point stand, as seen in Clone Lord. No gods, random confluence or celestial phenomena. Interdimensional disasters, echoing outwards through our perception. I think, therefore I am. They do not, so they are not. Gods are for the weak. I am not weak. Yet, let's be honest, Fabius Bile is outright wrong here. He is denying the primordial truth. Gods are real. They are dark and twisted. That they do not interact with you does not mean they are not there. They are random and do not always deal upon their own accord. But that does not make them any less or more real in 40k. Others, like the farseer Ileana Nastase, argues that power defines a god, whether it is temporal, spiritual or physical. For the warp gods, faith and worship are also rather important. While the Great Four have become powerful enough to be self-sustaining, lesser deities unravel without direct worship. The most important fact about the warp-based gods for this video is that their origins are not set in stone. Most of the Chaos gods are massive clusters of souls, essentially massive black holes floating around in the warp that force all power and souls to slowly gravitate towards them, allowing them to continue growing their size and split parts off to make demon servants. But lesser powers, like currently Vashtor or for example Be'lakor, need mortals to empower them. They are not yet big enough to grow by themselves. Now, just to quickly name all 8 Chaos gods and establish who they are. We have Khorne, the Blood God, Tzeentch, the Changer of Ways, Nurgle, the Plague Father, and Slaanesh, the Dark Prince for the 4 main gods. Then we have Ravenous Dissolution, best described as Malice, who encompasses all of the hatred of the warp, especially the hatred of the self, and is therefore highly self-destructive to both mortals and other forces of chaos. We have Malevolent Artifice, who is definitely intended to be the future fully ascended Vashtor the Archivane. I made a whole video about that, so go check out my Vashtor video if you haven't already. There's also Formless Distortion, and I'm going to be honest, this Chaos God is a bit weird. He is basically the true essence of chaos, in being endlessly shifting and unknowable, changing and perverting everything it touches, which might be the Pater Mutatis. You know, the evil god version of Fabius, but this remains to be seen. And last, but certainly not least, the focus of today's video. Chaos God number 8, Encroaching Ruin, the End and the Death, the Dark King himself. So those are the Chaos Gods, massive black holes of near limitless power, floating around in a section of the warp known as the Realm of Chaos. Each has its own purpose, but also desires to overthrow the others. And the Dark King has quite an interesting position in this pantheon. Let's get into it. Who or what exactly is the Dark King? As the Horus Heresy approaches its conclusion, the whole galaxy holds its breath. On the distant craft world of Ultway, the Harlequins appear for the first time in millennia. They hold one of their dances, the first one they share with all of their race. Craftworlders, Exodites, Corsairs and even Drukhari from all over the galaxy gather to witness the play. Eldrad insists everyone is welcome as long as they arrive before the dance begins. Yet the dance is interrupted. Eldrad proclaims it is the dance without end, a grim reminder of the fall. Yet while the Farseer demands to talk about the fate of humanity, he is stopped and shown what the dance is truly about. It is not the dance without end. It is the dance of the end and the death, with a solitaire playing the part of the Dark King. This is a play that was previously only shared in Commorragh. Humanity would not just be destroyed upon distant Terra, they would give birth to a new primordial annihilator who would shake the very foundations of reality. Closer to Terra, we get to see a strange occurrence, whether it is the lower decks of the Phalanx, a high-ranking admiral on Luna, or literally Abaddon, first captain of the Sons of Horus. Anyone who interacts with a tarot deck will see the following cards: the Lightning Tower and the Emperor, and finally, the Dark King. Essentially, this play by the Harlequins is a warning of the coming Dark King. Tarot cards across the galaxy are showing the same prophecy, and even Malkador and the Emperor himself are starting to get scared. The Dark King is coming, and nobody knows who will bring it into existence. As the prophecies sharpen and get more dire, panic starts to set in, because simply put, the name is appearing everywhere, but nobody knows what it means, or what to do with it, as seen in The End in the Death Volume 2, when Ahriman realizes the Dark King is right around the corner. You'll use magic and arcane learning to divest yourself of any allegiance to your Dark King. Cinderman smiles at the traitor. What do you mean? I mean, carve out some small parcel of this abominable future for yourself, independent from... No, that name. What do you mean by it, Remembrancer? The Dark King? We understood that's what his name would be, a prophesied name of the god to come. I know what it is. It is a name that has lain cold and unsaid for a long time. It is everywhere. Every book we opened seemed to contain the name. And it has been reported to us that the name is being spoken among the ranks of the traitors and uttered by never-born blasphemies. Have you not heard it yourself? I have not been listening, just as I cannot see the future. I have stopped listening to the present. For one such as me, Kirill Cinderman, the warp has become too deafening. I have shut it out, as not to be driven from my wits as I complete my work. If the name is being spoken, then its time is here. It seems to hold significance for you. It does. If Horus Lupercal is truly the Dark King Ascendant, then his power will be even greater than I dreaded. I feared he would become godlike, a being so mighty, it was effectively and functionally a god. But if he is anointed as the Dark King, then he's truly a god indeed, a divinity, an omnipotent being. And how is that any different? The four principles of chaos have invested their power and influence in Horus. They have blessed him with unrivaled strength, so that, to you or me, he would seem a god. But he is an instrument, a slave to their darkness. However, if he has become, or is becoming, the Dark King, then they have rashly permitted his full apotheosis. He is ascendant in his own right. Show me the works where the name appeared. As Ahriman manages to find and read some of the books about the Dark King, he comes to a rather frightening realization. According to Ahriman, the prophecy has been diluted. Fate and the future have been twisted into a new meaning. When Horus pulled Terra into the warp and literally stopped time, he indirectly changed everything. Fate has been derailed, and the prophecy of the Dark King has fallen sideways. And after consulting a tarot deck, Ahriman realizes that the Emperor is the one to become the Dark King, not Horus. Reality, hell, even the warp itself, is literally breaking during the siege of Terra. The Golden Throne is being destabilized by the manifestation of the Dark King. So, where and when is this Dark King spawning? And why is it the Emperor that becomes him? Well, as you might know, when the Emperor, Rogaldorn and Sanguinius teleport upon the Vengeful Spirit to challenge the Archtraitor Horus, the Emperor realizes that he is completely outmatched. So, instead of facing his son like a man, he decides he must become something more. He starts drinking from the warp, he takes off his glove and pulls the warp in with unimaginable control. His soul swells, unlimited power runs through his veins, and from the outside perspective, he is starting to look like a sentient black hole. Sanguinius is dead, Rogaldorn is trapped and possibly gone forever, so he must do this. The Emperor convinces himself he must become the Dark King. Yet great power comes with great responsibility, but it also comes with a great price to pay, and the Dark King would exact the heaviest price imaginable. The master of mankind, beloved by all, was robbed of his humanity. Custodians were burnt alive in his presence, and in every way and form, he was becoming a monster. The strain of the Dark King's apotheosis is something words cannot describe. It exacts a toll on Malcador as well, and the raw power the Emperor consumed only left him more hungry. The Dark King's hunger will see the galaxy grow cold. Everything will be consumed, destroyed and brought into ruin. Only the dark husks of once bright stars will remain. While Horus would be defeated, another greater threat arose behind our backs. No power in creation can stand in opposition to the Dark King. While I could stop this segment right here, I do want to quickly note that shortly after becoming the Dark King, the Emperor is convinced by John Grammaticus and Alanius Person, two incredibly powerful perpetuals, to let go of his power and face Horus as a mere man. The Emperor complies and releases the Dark King into the warp, and at the same time shreds a part of his soul as well, which gets turned into the Star Child, that at some point I will make a separate video about. Essentially, the Dark King has been formed, but for the rest of the heresy, it is not actually used. But luckily for us, we already know some of the powers from the Dark King, giving us an idea of what this god would have been like if we actually saw it in action. Which, spoiler alert, if it actually fully awakened immediately, the universe, yeah, universe, not galaxy, would have been changed and essentially obliterated at an atomic level. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's take a look at the powers of the Dark King. What are the powers of the Dark King? What makes him this galaxy-shaking entity? And more importantly, what are his demons like? Well, let's start from the bottom and look at what his demons look like, as they are essentially mini versions of their associated gods. Surprisingly, for not being an awakened god just yet, we do have information about the demons of the Dark King, Samus being the best example. And of course, the demons explained in the burning of Omat that attacked the Iron Hands. The demons of the Dark King are the purest form of terror, hungering only for destruction and ruin. To these demons, nothing matters except death and fear. Demons belonging to different gods were already flooding the battlefield, but when Samus arrived, Omat was truly doomed. The sons of Horus Captain Degyan fell, his body becoming a portal for Samus. Rifts opened up everywhere, and demons spilled forth in nightmarish numbers. These demons were cadaverous, hunched figures with their skin slouching off and their eyes weeping blood. Others were twisted flesh metal beings or monstrous cavalry of brass and bone. Samus was bound to the traitor cause, but every other demon rampaged, attacking both sides at will. Now, how strong is Samus? We have seen him show up in various novels, and well, he does not have the best track record. But when not having to face a named Ultramarine with no helmet or Garfield Loken, Samus is pretty lethal. Samus killed Iron Hands with ease on Omat. Only their last 3 Contemptor Dreadnoughts posed any challenge, but their barrage of Power Fist blows did little. The flesh of Samus reknit fast, and the Dreadnoughts were pulled apart one by one. Samus savored each Dreadnought kill, feasting on what little flesh remained inside. Now Samus is a rather important character to the Horus Heresy. He is the demon that shows up when you least expect it. But honestly, I cannot bring myself to spoil the most important moments of his during the end and the death. So go read these novels when you get the chance. The Samus timeline is absolutely great. The Dark King himself was a force of wrath and vengeance, but there was so much power radiating from it that just looking at him could kill you. As we see with the Perpetual Actiae in The End in the Depth Volume 2. From her grave, she has seen Person, Urda's warriors, and the mutilated Grammaticus, the only surviving members of the Long Companions. Their spirit and hope are annihilated, their cause lost. Out of something, perhaps the kindness that Person chided her about, she tried to warn them, to urge them to flee, to at least save themselves. But her wounded mind was too weak to sustain her voice for long, and now she is helpless and mute. She can see the Dark King. He is here now, and upon this world. It is impossible not to see him, even with a mind as damaged and blinded as hers, for his consuming darkness is as bright and ferocious as a black star. He is everywhere and everything, fusing and burning everything around him with the scorching radiance of his power. Such a thing, in her wildest visions, she could never have imagined such a creature. The universe is not big enough to contain him. The cardinal powers of chaos are but ghosts in his shadow, and the almighty warp obeys his voice, helpless in his tidal pull. Terrible, beautiful, inconceivable, unimaginable. The Dark King is here, and every atom of the universe will be changed. She tries to see him, to behold him as he approaches. One glimpse destroys her, all kills her like a lightning bolt. Dead, she lives. She will not look again, she cannot. She closes her mind and submits to the dust and darkness and pain. She saw for one instant what he was. Everything has indeed changed. Everything they thought was wrong. Every assumption was false. Ruin has triumphed indeed, more deeply and more completely than their worst imaginings. The Dark King is here, and he is not what they thought he was at all. While Actiae is a decently powerful character in her own right, we also get to see Malcador's perspective on the Dark King. It is the Emperor, empowered by the warp, the brightest thing in the galaxy. His light is everywhere. It spills across all other nows. It bleaches the pulped battlescapes of Terra into whiteness. It catches the lines of Valdor's wargear and glints on the harder edges of his too transformed thoughts. It slowly eats away the shadow under the red wall where Dorn shelters, talking to himself. It burns the soul of Sanguinius, though he is buried deep in a lightless crypt. It is the light that casts the shadows of the Dark King. I try to speak, I still cannot. The steadfast light is everywhere, permeating every now that was and could be. In one, ancient, inhuman creatures pause in their work, look up from the half-built devices of intricate complexity, and shield their eyes against the rising glare. They start to will. In another, the world is without form and void, and darkness moves upon the face of the deep, and the steadfast light says, "Let me be," and it is. In another, and another, and an infinity of others, there is only light, and its antithesis has burned everything away with its unholy intensity. Only in one now, a gloomy and decaying now, does the light not penetrate. It is a realm of shadows and candlelight, a grim darkness of ruin and disrepair, where men are shackled by ancient duties, imperfectly remembered but obsessively performed. Where lamp glow flickers of the flaking guilt of past glories and the faded majesty of once proud emblems, where the functions of machines and the purposes of humans are forgotten or misunderstood, and have been reduced to rote and ceremony and rite, a now where everything, including the meaning of life, has become no more than rehearsed tradition and meaningless ritual. I cannot speak, I cannot block the light, I can only seize upon these unexpected scraps of suddenly renewed strength to expand my fraying will and guide the few who might still hear me. They are almost out of reach now, and I have all but forgotten their names, yet I still strive to call to them, to steer them, in the hope that one of them will listen, and one of them, just one, will be enough. Yet for all the power of the encroaching ruin that is the Dark King, Malcador still believes there is a chance to avert this ultimate crisis, to stop the Dark King, Olanius Person, Garfield Loken, John Grammaticus and Leto try to reason with the Emperor. What they found was an immense black sphere. The only reason they still lived was that the Emperor found their presence an impossible curiosity. All argued with the master of mankind, testing his limits, but only after he asked him if winning as a destructive god was better than losing as an honorable man did the Emperor fully comply. Using the very last bit of his self-control, the Emperor banished the ascending Dark King, something that in itself should have been an impossibility. A single custodian, Kicaltus Dusk, who survived standing in the aura of the Dark King, would be restored to full power. Garfield Loken and Leto would have their armor remade, and Olanius would have every ache and pain he suffered over the millennia disappear. John Grammaticus was blind and crippled, but the Emperor restored all of his senses. If the Emperor had to fight Horus without the power of a god, but instead with the power of a man, he would not do so alone. All of them were restored to full health, to full strength. So yeah, the Dark King can summon demons, take control of other demonic forces, burn your soul out by just looking at him, and restore or reset your physical body, to heal you back to perfection in an instant. And don't forget, this version of the Dark King was just a baby god. It was barely awake, barely sentient. The Emperor, as a mere man, could still barely control it. After this moment, we do not exactly know what happens with the Dark King, but we do know that he's still out there. He was not destroyed, he was just banished, like you would with any other demon that you cannot truly kill. But let's take a look at the purpose of the Dark King. Why did Games Workshop write him into the lore in the first place? Now, as I said earlier, the Dark King would not only essentially be the Slanesh to humanity, like it was for the ancient Eldar Empire, but its bird scream would also change everything in the galaxy. When the Emperor banished him, the substance of creation shuddered. The material and immaterial were in literal shock. The Dark King would have remade the galaxy from the atom up. It would essentially have been a new Big Bang. For a brief moment, existence as a whole is a stutter. All of that power the Emperor had sucked into himself was expelled and scattered. It went pouring right back into the Empyrean, a broken prophecy, and the driftwood of predictions along with it. Demons willed en masse, they turned in on themselves, their promised future lost, their dreams of consuming all of existence thrown into the trash. Yet the Neverborn are not wailing for long. Sure, the Dark King is gone, but they see another victory. Mankind will fall with the Emperor. Chaos undivided in Horus Lupercal will be triumphant. But what would the Dark King have been for the Neverborn? To them, he would have been magnificent and an absolute abolition. Perhaps the purpose of the Dark King is not just to scour existence clean, but to bring about a fusion of the materium and immaterium, where demonkind reigns absolute. Perhaps the Dark King's name is literal, an absolute monarch. Maybe true primordial annihilation is the rise of the demonic to rule and torment as they please, without any challenge. eternal slaughter for the Blood God, rapturous sensation for Slanesh, eternal stagnation for Nurgle, and the ultimate fate for Tzeentch. Now, I have to take a small sidestep here with Tzeentch. As well, he has something rather interesting to say about his hatred of Nurgle. According to Tzeentch, if Nurgle ever wins the great game, he will break the very foundations of reality to bring about the ultimate rebirth of existence. And so Tzeentch opposes him, not wanting life as we know it to be truly gone. But what if? And I know it sounds crazy, but what if the Dark King's encroaching ruin would be a galaxy on the edge of death? Existence would be the perfect breeding ground for the Neverborn, but with the Dark King also being the Emperor, is all of this the short-sightedness of chaos? With the Emperor as Dark King, he might have gone one step further, actually seeing the end of chaos, the death of all existence, the ruin that could never be recovered. The consequences of the Dark King have been dire to say the least. First and foremost is the fact that to banish him, the Emperor had to cast aside a part of his own soul. All of his hope, loyalty, compassion, and the very humanity of the Emperor is now gone forever. When the Emperor fought Horus, the War Master would use a tarot card of the Dark King to mock his father. Of course, the biggest consequence is the fact that the Emperor will be mortally wounded by Horus. With the Dark King, he could have won. Without it, he stood very little chance. Now, the Dark King has been a very hot topic in the Warhammer community since the End in the Death. But with the recent release of Ashes of the Imperium, I think there are more hints for just how devastating the Dark King will become. After the death of Horus, we learned that the warp was severely damaged. Some described it as being burned. For Psykers, it felt as though they had lost a limb, feeling the warp almost like a phantom. Even the Astronomicon was weak, and warp travel became difficult. Not because of its dangers, but because there was nothing to propel it forward. But no Astronomicon was an apocalyptic problem. Not a single Imperial ship across the entire galaxy could hope to navigate even the shortest warp jump. So desperately, Roboute Guilliman tries to figure out what is going on, as seen in Ashes of the Imperium. So tell me, how is it? Any change? Anything at all? Chief Librarian Praeto drew in a deep breath. I would say no, my liege. I feel nothing. No stirrings of the veil. No murmuring from beyond it. He clutched his staff a little tighter as he spoke. This still felt so very wrong. I lift my hand and no power stirs. For some time, as you know, I felt that the fault was within me, but the effect is universal. No place on Terra is untouched by it. Fleet reports say the same thing. And so you know what my next question will be. Will it return? That I cannot say. There have been ebbs and flows before, but nothing so complete. For now, there is only an absence, not a weakening, not a diminution, but an absence. I believe you, and consider what we know. My father fought not just my brother, but the powers behind my brother. He poured out his entire strength on them, a contest that sundered both space and time. Horus was destroyed, we understand this. And if Horus was merely a cipher for others, then perhaps those others were destroyed too, forever. Praeto felt uncomfortable even conceiving of it. That feels too simple. Guilliman smiled. Because everything has been difficult for so long. We have been staring at defeat for 7 years, long enough to forget any other outcome. But my father had power beyond all reckoning. When he was finally in the place to use it, who knows what it could achieve? I cannot discount the possibility. Yeah, the Emperor did go all out against Horus, but with just how much power was sucked into creating the Dark King, Is it that hard to conclude that this hole in the immaterium that all of these psychers on Terra are feeling is the after effect of the Dark King being stopped? What if this emptiness they are feeling would have been the end result of true encroaching ruin? Another consequence related to this is the state of the Golden Throne in ashes of the Imperium. There is a genuine debate inside the Imperium for why the Emperor was placed upon the throne. Reports contradict each other. Some say it was because it would heal the Emperor, or to halt the breach of the webway. Others speculate that the Emperor was rebuilding the palace or communing with isolated loyalist forces. The throne, however, was in such shambles to the point it had become a black hole of power. Funnily enough, it isn't even in the same room it's supposed to be. Somehow, it teleported across the Imperial Palace during the Siege of Terra. Horus is dead, and so is the mortal body of the Emperor. But the Dark King persists. He lurks, waiting and waiting. He wants the body of the Emperor, turn it into his own vessel. It was promised to him after all, and he will have it. Should the Emperor ever be resurrected or leave the Golden Throne, the Dark King will take what little was left of him and rise once more. The encroaching ruin is still encroaching. The end and the death have only been delayed, but not averted. The Dark King is patient. It does not matter if he will come about in a year, a millennium, 10 millennia, or 100 millennia. The Dark King awaits the day the master of mankind rises from his throne, and then will take his body for his own. So, what does the Dark King actually mean for 40k as a whole? What can GW do with him? Well, I think we could see more about the Dark King in the Scouring series, as we may or may not already see the after effects of him in the ashes of the Imperium. But besides that, until we get more 40k books where he is actually mentioned, it's hard to tell what they really plan on doing with him. Of course, he suffers the Apocalypse God issue, which, if you don't know what that means in the context of 40k, it means that no matter how they introduce or use him, the moment he awakens, 40k as we know it ends. Everything is changed, everybody dies, and boom, the setting is gone. Which, with GW being a company that wants to make money, is never really an option. Maybe he's going to get something like a Vestar treatment, one big campaign where he is involved in, forgotten about for a couple of years, and then reintroduced in the new Archmagel's novel. Malice has also not really made an appearance in a couple of years, and we still do not have a good answer for who Formless Distortion is, so who knows. Currently, the Dark King is a plot device that GW only recently introduced, but I'm sure we will see him many times in the near future. Maybe he's being saved for the Amazon show, Henry Cavill the Dark King. It does have a nice ring to it. The ancient shadows that have covered Terra have passed, colossal armies have been bled dry, and the fate of mankind has been decided. The screams of the innocent, the pleas of the righteous, now play to the tune of the laughter of dark gods. Although the Emperor sold his life to prevent the eternal damnation of humanity during the Horus Heresy, he did so at the cost of untold suffering. Deep inside the Imperial Palace, upon a golden throne, sits the graven image of the immortal Emperor. His Majesty as the golden leader and master of mankind is gone. Now there's only the skull-faced warlock upon a mighty throne, eternally alive, eternally upon the edge of death. Here, he imposes his right to rule. This is the very image of what the boldest pilgrims proclaim that the God Emperor has become. He has become the carrion lord of the Imperium. He is a facade, an image crafted to give truth to the words of the zealous, an image created for the masses of humanity who descend ever deeper into the madness of religious zealotry, and in every way imaginable, an image created as a lie to trick those who would seek to harm him. Deeper down, in the innermost sanctum, through doors which open only by the will of the custodian guard, sits the real golden throne. This strangely organic room is the Imperium's greatest secret. Everything about it would horrify even the most fervent of believers. Intestine-like cables hang all about him, clicking, ticking life support engines, surrounded by blood bags. Preservative mist spray into the air in 9-second intervals. This golden throne is closer to a chair when compared to the grand artworks which are spread all over the galaxy. It is a throne without the capital T. It is both a curse and a salvation for humanity. The thing that sits upon it is a revenant husk of something that was once a man. Although the Emperor no longer commands his subjects or his warriors through words or actions, his presence is felt across the entire galaxy through the light of the Astronomicon. To sustain the Emperor, 1,000 souls are sacrificed to the Golden Throne every single day. Yet this price is not the only one paid by the Imperium. Upon Holy Terra stands the Astronomicon, which radiates a magnificent golden beacon that shines through the madness of the warp. It is through this light that the vast armies of the Imperium can travel the stars, a light generated by a vast choir of psychers, which is focused and beamed forward by the mind of the Emperor himself. This marvel of human technology, perseverance, and willpower kills hundreds of psychers every day as they burn out their minds in limitless agony. But as the saying goes, it is only a small price to pay for the continued survival of humanity. Yet all of this, from rotting carcass to skull-faced warlock, was not who the Emperor always was. These images of a long-dead ruler are a disservice to the man who sought to unite humanity. A man with near infinite power and knowledge, a being so powerful that even the greatest minds ever produced by humanity paled in comparison. If the immortal Emperor truly is as great as his worshippers make him out to be, why has he not resurrected and returned to lead humanity in its darkest hour? And with that dramatic intro out of the way, let's get into it. The first lore questions we have to answer are if the Emperor is actually dead or alive, and if the Golden Throne is still actually doing anything. Is it even functional at this point? Is it keeping him alive? The Emperor was a man of great designs and even greater plans, yet he was not someone to advance technology beyond the heights of humanity's golden age. From his vast laboratories, which churned out countless weapons of war, to the very Golden Throne itself, the master of mankind took what existed and bent it to his own will. Where once abominable intelligence led the way, the King of Ages created patchworked biotechnical solutions. He blended technology and necromancy, magic and manufacturing. Many aspects of the Golden Throne are beyond the understanding of even the custodies, but what they do understand is its purpose. Purposes which are shared only between the talents of the Emperor, his Holy Inquisition, and the highest members of the Adeptus Mechanicus. In the 41st and 42nd millennia, the Golden Throne serves three main purposes. Number 1, it is a ludicrously potent psychic amplification device that allows the Emperor to single-handedly hold back the tides of the warp. Originally, he had a whole bunch of psychic wards around the solar system that prevented demonic incursions, but those ended up getting shattered by his son Magnus. So now the Emperor, through the use of the Golden Golden Throne has been holding the demonic tides back for 10,000 years. The second purpose of the throne is that it is linked to the Astronomicon in the way that a portion of the Emperor's power keeps it lit. You can think of this thing as a giant golden beacon, an artificial North Star that produces psychic light that navigators aboard void vessels can see from any place in the galaxy or from within the tides of the warp, thus allowing them to ground themselves and safely navigate in much the same way that sailors navigated the seas of old Earth. The third purpose is that it is a life support system for the Emperor. This was something that was done last minute during the siege of Terra, after he had been mortally wounded by his son Horus. In all honesty, the throne is the only thing keeping the Emperor alive, and if it fails, he will surely truly die. But when the throne began to fail and the Mechanicus found itself unable to fix the problem as it had done in the past, with the blessings of the High Lords of Terra, the Custodes, and the aid of the Inquisition, a dark pact was made. No price was too high to restore the Golden Throne, so in the very last year of M41, in the closing days before the fall of Cadia, dozens of expeditions were launched, yet only one would be successful. Xantite Inquisitors prepared a war procession, opened the Exuberous portal, and journeyed into the very webway. These forces fought through Harlequin troops and demonic hordes, refusing to let anyone stand in their path until they reached Comorra. For centuries, the Mechanicus had worked on alternative solutions before the decision was made to contact the Drukhari, but all other options had failed. Humanity had anywhere from a decade to 2 centuries before the Golden Throne would give out and be broken forever. The Dark Eldar were permitted onto Holy Terra, observing the Golden Throne and the many patchworks the Mechanicus have added over the millennia to keep it working. The throne had grown to such a size that the human mind couldn't comprehend it, and even the visiting homunculus was impressed by it. For all the foulness of the Drukhari and their abandonment of psychic powers, they are the inheritors of the most psychically active empire to have ever existed. They have the tools and components with which to restore the Golden Throne, but while they asked a price for these components, they also had a dark plot. A plot that was outright the most gruesome betrayal humanity ever witnessed with any Xenos. Inquisitor Erasmus Krall had learned all he needed to know. The Drukhari were as much under attack as the rest of the galaxy. They claimed to need humanity to survive and thus were willing to aid them. Yet this was never about saving humanity. It was about saving Comorra and the Drukhari themselves. Inquisitor Krall interrupted the meeting. His body was failing him, but even while he was dying, he refused to let humanity be doomed, as seen in Vaults of Terra, the Dark City. "This is irrelevant," the Archon protested. "What is or is not? The case in Comorra is none of your concern. We have here a simple exchange of goods, one that has been scrutinized over and over again. There is no risk to your Imperium in this. It must conclude, or our guarantees of protection have become void." Krall laughed again, a horrible stretched sound. "None of your concern. You bolt together a cheap mockery of our holiest place. I call it none of your concern." He took an ominous step towards the Xenos ranks, looking as if he wished to charge straight into them. "Because you have been lying from the very start. All of it lies. Your witch there even said it to my face. He said the Emperor we place so much store by is entirely irrelevant to the machine's ongoing function. And as soon as he told me that, I knew something was wrong. Because I have been there. I have stood at the very doors of eternity and felt the power of his matchless Atlas will in motion. So do not tell me that he is irrelevant, because he is everything. He powers it and he guides it. Without his unspeakable sacrifice, we are all of us consigned to damnation. And those who are not already heretics know it. A throne is nothing without a king. Now the custodians were becoming more active. At some unspoken signal, their weapons moved in guard. Raskian started to get agitated, and more Skitarii shuffled up to protect the retreating caskets. The Xenos, by contrast, looked furious, all save the witch creature, who merely observed with something like cool detachment. "Complete the transaction," the Archon said, speaking directly to Raskian. "I say it again, what happens in Comora has no bearing on this deal." "Oh, but it does," said Kral, now grinning dementedly, pacing back and forth like an advocate before the accused. "Because there's only one thing you do not have, one facility that has withered you into nothing. You are masters of the material realm, that is certain. You are the destroyers of stars and the devourers of worlds, but you cannot stomach the warp. You have built a throne, but you cannot use it. You have made a seat, but cannot sit in it. Even the greatest of your kind, at the height of your race's dominance, would have struggled to occupy that machine. And now, none of you is strong enough for it. It is useless to you, a waste of all your sweat and toil. Unless, that is, you create an emperor of your own." Fabricator General Raskian and the custodies present had their doubts, but when Kral shared with them the fact that the homunculi could clone or resurrect someone with but a single droplet of blood, the room fell quiet. Inquisitors and tech priests alike were silenced, horrified by the revelation and too stunned to act. Yet the custodies present were not stunned. They were not frozen by what they had just learned. Their guardian spears were turned on the caskets containing pieces from the Golden Throne and obliterated them. In the ensuing fight, the custodies ordered Kral and his interrogator to leave and bring word of this to Terra, yet not a single soul present during the meeting would survive the battle that followed, besides a lone servo skull that somehow made it out intact. To add insult to injury, the traitor Primarch Fulgrim truly believes the Emperor has died, reinforcing the idea that the throne may have failed by now. As seen in the novel Fulgrim, the Perfect Son. "It grieves me to see what has become of humanity. The dream of my father's empire was flawed, built on broken foundations. Had it passed into my hands when he was gone, then it might yet have been made great. But my brothers never saw my vision. They never truly understood, not even Robute." Fulgrim shook his head ruefully. "And now this, my father, a rotting effigy bound to an imprisoning throne. My brothers, not content to sabotage my father's dreams, but to corrupt them, to enslave them to their own debased and twisted ideologies. The great brought low, the dream of perfection tainted." Fulgrim straightened his shoulders, the rippling saracen of his cloak haloing him in radiance. "But I shall remake the Imperium in my own image. When I sit upon the golden throne in glory, all shall be brought to a greater perfection than ever before. Those citizens who labor in darkness shall be brought forth into a new and transcendent light. Those whose ears have been filled with lies will be granted the revelation of truth, that their god emperor is dead, but his son and true heir walks amongst them, returned and radiant. And they shall kneel and worship on seeing the true face of their god." So, while we are unsure if the throne itself remains operational and if the Emperor is even alive, I have a feeling we will soon get more answers on this lore question in the upcoming third Bequin novel. But Dutch, I hear you ask, the Emperor is an immortal. He is literally a perpetual, a being that always comes back after dying. Why hasn't he revived yet? Especially now that we know the throne is failing or has failed. Well, I'm glad you asked, friend. Let's take a look at how perpetuals work when they interact with the Golden Throne. Of course, the Emperor is a perpetual, but not just any normal perpetual. He is the most powerful one that has ever existed, a different order of magnitude compared to the others. According to some, his power is so far beyond that of any other perpetual that he is an aberration, a freak. Perpetuals are, however, so much more than just immortals who return from death. Throughout the long history of humanity, the perpetuals have been highly influential. Some have become mentors to empires or guided humanity into greater heights. Some choose to lead nations or even achieve their own grand ambitions. But in truth, none of them has a true answer for what a perpetual is, other than a powerful immortal with nearly unlimited knowledge and impeccable intellect. Some speculate that the perpetuals are the next step in the evolution of mankind, but in any case, the most important fact about the perpetuals is their ability to return from death. The way through which a perpetual comes back from death is often different on a person-to-person basis. Some simply stand right back up after dying, others have to be reincarnated, and even if a perpetual is destroyed on the atomic level, they simply reappear a set amount of time later. So if the Emperor is one of these, how has he not revived yet? Well, before we get into that, I just want to go on a quick side tangent, since it is a question people have asked for actual decades. There is no reason to put the Emperor in a dreadnought. Many people bring this up as a solution to the Emperor's absence from the Greater Imperium, but the answer always remains the same. Putting the Emperor in a dreadnought not only means you are keeping him from properly regenerating, but you also make him fully redundant, as there's no way he could power the Astronomicon from long distances away in his current state. But back to the question, why has the Emperor not revived yet? Is the Golden Throne perpetually draining his power and keeping him dead? Or is it because of something much darker and sinister? This here is the crux of the video, and what most people miss when they read about the Emperor of Mankind. When the Emperor came to fight Horus, he realized he was nowhere near powerful enough to kill his once beloved son. So he did the impossible. He began drinking from the warp, growing his power 1,000-fold, and tried to become the Dark King, a being so powerful that it does not just overshadow the dark gods in its power, but will change every atom in the galaxy with its birth. By becoming the Dark King, the Emperor would have beaten Horus easily, but this would have come at a cost. He would have ascended into godhood and stood higher than any other god. He would have been the end and the death, the encroaching ruin, which would lead to utter primordial annihilation. The Dark King would not have stopped at Horus. It would have killed its rival gods, and when it had destroyed them, its gaze would turn to humanity. Yet Alanius' person convinced the Emperor otherwise, with the help of John Grammaticus, Garfield Loken, Eldrad Ultran, Urda, and other perpetuals. Was the master of mankind convinced to take another path? As a rising god, he had seen the flaws in his plan, the mistake of rushing headlong into victory and death. And so he abandoned his newly acquired power. The future was blank, but now there was at least a future. There is a place for a new plan, one which the Emperor will create after having learned from his mistakes. The master of mankind shudders the very substance of creation. The material and immaterial shake. Let this be the end, and let death be damned. The power of the Dark King is expelled and scattered, pouring back into the Imperium from whence it came, carrying with it Flotsam and Jetsam, the broken prophecies and predictions that brought it hence, the never-born will and mass, their whispers turned in on themselves, twisted back into lies and cackled falsehoods, their future so assured, suddenly untruthed. The malison of the Dark King passes from the material galaxy and back into the simmering caskets of myth, for this age at least. Demonkind, however, has their distress turned into cheering for a different kind of victory, the fall of mankind. When the power of the Dark King explodes from the master of mankind in a vast shockwave, he cocoons those who stood with him. If the Emperor were to face the arch-traitor as a mere man, he would not do so alone. As a man, the Emperor fell when fighting Horus. He would destroy his wayward son, but the master of mankind would come to realize the true error of his mistake. The Dark King still prevails. He lurks, waiting and biding his time. The mortal body of the Emperor is to be his vessel. It was promised to the Dark King, and he will take it. Should the Emperor be resurrected or leave the Golden Throne, the Dark King will take what little was left of him after fighting Horus. And while this is personal interpretation on the sources we have covered so far, the end and the death of all things will come. The ruin of all of humanity and the galaxy itself is encroaching. The Dark King is patient. It does not matter if he will come about in a year, a millennium, 10 millennia, or 100 millennia. The Dark King awaits the day the master of mankind rises from his throne and then will take his body for his own. So this raises the question, did the Emperor truly understand this? Or is it a coincidence? Because if you haven't figured it out yet, the Golden Throne is keeping the Emperor dead. It is killing him over and over, just to assure he cannot be possessed by the dark god he created himself. Essentially, how does the Emperor stay dead? When Rogaldorn, Vulcan, and those few custodies who still lived after the Horus heresy entombed the Emperor upon the Golden Throne, they thought they would save him. Instead, they made a grave error, and the best decision ever. They would deny the Emperor the ability to return, but also denied the Dark King from taking what he wants. Yet for as much as the Emperor needed the Golden Throne also needed him, and the following excerpt shines more light as to how it is keeping him in a deathless state, as seen in The End in the Death Volume 3, when Malcador sees his King of Ages being carried towards the throne. As they bring him up the steps towards me, I feel their urgent expectation. The throne is his only chance. It will save him. It will restore him and sustain him. This is what they have understood from the signs and symbols that both he and I have tried to show them. For signs and symbols are the only language we have left. This will save him, like plants, though symbols are imprecise. They are fluid and they seldom mean what we presume they mean. Rogel and Constantine believe they are saving him. They think that the throne is his only chance. In fact, the reverse is also true. He is the throne's only chance. I know it, and my friend knows it. This is what we are trying to tell them. Yes, the throne may stabilize and suspend him, as it did to me, but that's besides the point. He is the only one who can stabilize it, for I can no longer perform that task, and thus it will tether him here, to this seat, to this room, to this reality, on the brink of death and the verge of life, both wounded and whole, unborn yet reborn, ended yet unending, now and forever. It was never his intended plan, but it was a contingency. My King of Ages knew it might come to this if the permutations of the future aligned in this particular way. That's what he told me. anyway. He had me believe he would be ready if there were no other choices, and I see none from where I am sitting. It will be agony, I can vouch for that. I have tasted but a brief moment of that eternity, and that is more than enough. May your death live forever, my friend. There's nothing immortal about this, and so they come. They ascend the steps, none of them speak, but I feel the hope in their minds. What they do now, they do only for his salvation. I want to correct them, I want to explain their mistake, but I can't. And even if I could, perhaps I wouldn't. The truth is brutal. At least this way, they have some solace, some small consolation in the face of tragedy. They should have that much. They need to be strong for what lies ahead. This is where it will end, here in my flames, but it is also where it will begin. To explain this excerpt in terms that people can actually understand, the throne doesn't just connect to you, it places you out of reality. It turns you into a deathless ball of focus, knowledge and energy. It allows you to focus your soul. But in turn, the golden throne must also be focused by whoever sits upon it to properly function. This is how the Emperor has stayed away from true death, and how he is able to infinitely stave off the Dark King or his own revival until the throne itself finally breaks. There is, of course, a very important second side to this. Besides the golden throne keeping the Emperor dead or alive, namely the divinity of the Emperor and how widespread his worship has become. Now, this enters the realm of theory and speculation, but let's talk about it. What if the reason the Adeptus Custodes have allowed the Ecclesiarchy to gain so much power is because of the Emperor's own will? In the conclusion of the Dark Imperium trilogy, we see the semi-awakened God Emperor resurrect Guilliman and, through his body, not only banish Mortarion, but also utterly shame him and Nurgle himself. In a way, the Emperor has been growing in power, while staying in his suspended state on the Golden Throne, reinforcing and growing out of reach of the Dark King, in preparation for their inevitable fight. In conclusion, the reason the Emperor has not allowed himself to revive is because he knows what waits for him when he does. The Golden Throne, therefore, should not be allowed to fail. In an era where the Imperium is besieged on all sides, the true threats are not to be found among the countless hordes of demons, aliens, heretics and mutants, but instead in an unborn god. Much like the fall of the ancient Eldari Empire, the most horrific fate awaits the Imperium. Perhaps the revisited Terminus Decree has a reason for being the way it is. That if the Dark King stands up from the throne instead of the Golden Emperor, that they have to place him back on there to assure the Emperor can take command once again. In any case, the end of the Horus Heresy and the start of the Scouring have opened the door to many new stories being told. Watchers of the Throne and the Vaults of Terra series might only have been a preview of what is to come. While I'm also excited for the Scouring series, I am even more excited to see the final Backwind book, as it might tell us even more about the Dark King and why Valdor is hunting for the Emperor's true name, because who knows what that will entail. And that concludes my overview of the relevant lore about the Emperor of Mankind video. Once new lore is released by Games Workshop, I'll be making sure to create more content on those sources. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the subscribe button. If not, that's completely fine, and I wish you all a great day.